Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Lawsplaining the Interwebs. I'm your host, Nick Ricada of Ricada Law, small law firm in central Minnesota. And with me again today for the trifecta is Mr. Joe Neerman of Good Lawgic.
Good evening. How are you tonight?
I'm great, man. I'm excited to finish up this document, and I'm excited to talk about today's proceedings with you.
Okay.
I want to get, I don't know how much of it you watched. I was there for all eye bleeding 8 hours of it.
You are basically Mr. Impeachment. I mean, first of all, our coverage of this is like far more comprehensive than the interns who are working for Castor as far as reviewing it, because we're just going line by line and just breaking down the 78 pages,
Yeah.
literally as if we're working for the guy. And then you spend 8 hours a day just streaming like any idiocy that the Democrats want to throw out there. You're sitting there commenting on it. I mean, God bless.
It
God
was
bless.
it was a fun day. I actually enjoyed today. There was plenty to be mad at. You know, it did get real monotonous for a while. They showed the same. They have a roster of like 40 tweets. And there's some real go-to superstars for them. None of which happened to say, "Please go commit crime." So that's a
Right.
problem for them, but there's one that they went to, I mean 5 or 6 times. And by the sixth time I'm just like, "Will you stop showing the
Fight,
same?"
fight like hell. Which one?
No, it wasn't even the fight like hell. It's God, it was I can't even remember. I just remember the highlighting pattern. They had the top line highlighted, then they had a little highlight, then they skipped a couple words, and then they highlighted after it, and then they
Oh, it's gonna be
highlighted the bottom.
wild. The one he
Yeah.
said, "Come." It's
Yes,
gonna be
it's
wild.
gonna be wild. It's gonna be
Yeah,
wild.
it's gonna be wild.
And I'm like,
Yeah,
okay. I mean,
yeah.
you put
Clearly that means grab grab the rifle, and we're gonna be gunning down Mitt Romney
right.
because CNN says
It's gonna be
his life was
wild
the one.
drawing and quartering these congressmen.
I
Wild.
get the mace and the chains. We're gonna go out there. I want to just I want so I actually so your audience doesn't think that we do this and then it just goes into a void and we never look at it again. You
Yeah.
should know this. I go through our work like afterwards. Like I look through the comments because you're sitting there, you're able to see the comments if you want. I don't see it. People don't realize this. I only see you and me like in the little corner, which I wonder if I touch my box, will I see me big and you small? Is that what would happen here if I did that? Am I gonna or are we
Oh,
gonna
oh,
hang up on you?
yeah, if there's actually, you can pin like my face on that. If you click on my
Oh,
picture.
this is way better. Now I see me. Now I see me. And that's way better. No offense.
Oh, good.
So,
No, see, that's fine. You don't want to look at me.
no, because now I see what people are seeing when they see me. Otherwise, I'm like this tiny little
Yeah.
box there.
I could
So,
always send you a link to just the chat too if you want it. I don't know if that would be helpful for you.
oh, and that way right. So I won't be watching the camera that you're seeing. I'll be looking at the overall
You'd have to pull
view
it up. I don't
screen.
know. I don't know what your setup looks like. I have 3 monitors here, so I'm like, looking
Right.
all over the place like a dummy. But
Right. Okay.
yeah, if you ever want that, you just let me know. I can send it over. So
So before you get to the review from
yeah.
today, the reason I brought this up is because I actually was reviewing our show from last night,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a few thoughts that I really wanted to share with you and and just wrap that up before we move on into the new stuff and what happened today. Okay. So first and foremost, I want to bring up, we were talking about the Florida case and how they basically were saying that if an impeachment session had started or was underway, that it could continue even after the person left office.
Right.
And I was saying that I'm not sure why they bring this up because that really could be an argument for the other side. Because the Democrats would say, well, we started the impeachment while he was still in office. According to that Florida case, we're allowed to continue with that. And then I thought about it some more, and this is a little bit of a deep thought. So people in the back who aren't really confident in their legal reasoning skills might want to just zone out for a couple minutes while I go through this. So no offense anyway. Uh, um, so think about this for a second. Why would it make sense to say that once an impeachment is underway, that would create a license to continue even if the guy leaves? Why would that create a license? The reason it would create a license, if logically, would be because otherwise they might pull a Nixon. You start an impeachment proceeding. I don't want to go through that embarrassment. I don't want to face the humiliation because there is, or at least there was before Trump came to office, there was a real humiliation. just to the notion of being impeached. Now it's almost like a badge of honor that it's
Right.
like they hate me so much they're impeaching me. But certainly when the Florida case was being decided, or before 5 years ago, impeachment was humiliating. And that's a stain on your legacy forever that no one would want to endure. So you can understand why the Florida court would say, you know what, we're not going to let you get out of it by resigning.
Right.
So that's why they would say, once it started, now you resign, we're still going to go forward. We're not going to be able to, you're not going to be able to escape that embarrassment, that culpability by skipping town and saying, I'm resigning, I'm out of here. And that means your impeachment must end. We're not going to give you that power to escape that type of culpability. And that would explain why the Florida court would do it. Because what's the purpose, as we're all examining here, what's the purpose in having impeachment once the guy's gone? I mean, who
Yeah.
cares? If you're not removed, what's the purpose? The only purpose and logic behind the Florida ruling would be that we don't want to have someone escape that humiliation by simply resigning and almost being like, well, now you can't talk about me anymore because I've
You,
resigned. And now
you can't
that means
fire
that the
me.
death.
I quit.
Yes, exactly. Right. That's exactly right. So that would explain it. But a situation where a person doesn't skip town, like here, where Trump didn't skip town, he said, no, I'm not leaving. Good luck impeaching me. So now in this situation, that motive of saying that the commencement of impeachment should allow it to continue beyond the person's term, that doesn't apply when the guy doesn't skip town. He wasn't trying to escape culpability. He wasn't trying to escape responsibility or having the shame of being impeached. His term just ended and he had to leave. In that situation, the rationale of the Florida courts coming up with saying that there should be continued impeachment even after the term, that wouldn't apply anymore. And there's no basis or reason to go forward with impeachment just because it had started while the guy was still in session. So
Right.
that
I
makes
yeah.
sense. I mean, you see what I'm saying as far as like why that would be a distinction, and why if the Democrats tried flipping the Florida case around, that would be a great way for the Trump team to get it back on course and say, no, 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 just because they say it started, that their rationale there was to stop people from skipping when it's not someone skipping. And that's the distinction that you made. You
Yeah.
asked me this question yesterday. You probably don't remember because you've been
No, I
doing
do.
too
I
many
was
things
about
for
to
the
bring
last.
it up.
Yeah, you asked me this very question. Do I see a distinction between someone who leaves and someone whose term ends? And I said, yeah. And I couldn't really explain why, but this would explain why. This is
Hmm.
like sometimes you sort of feel something in your gut and you sort of have to, a little time away, you can understand why your gut came to that realization, even if it's not something that you understand intellectually as to why it is that you came to that. So, but
Right.
that was a thought that I had that I wanted to share with you. Then I had two more things real quick.
Yeah, of course.
My next one was, what would you think about Biden writing a little EO that the impeachment applies to people who have left office?
Uh,
Mr. King Biden, His Highness, taking
yeah.
out his pen and trying to change it that way.
So I think that would leave the Republicans in the Senate with an obligation to bring a case before the Supreme Court based on separation of powers against Biden and say no, or no. I guess it'd be House. It'd be House members. No, no, no. I think it'd be Senate members.
I mean, I think you could say he can't do it because of ex post facto. Like you can't apply it to, even if you want to do it, you can't apply it to Trump because that'd be ex post facto for him to do it now and say, well, now that it's a law, now we can go forward with impeachment because you would be backdating it to this particular offense, which happened beforehand, before the passage of the EO. But I did think it would be like an interesting little wrinkle that I would not put beyond Biden or the Democrats from trying to come up with
Yeah,
that way of overcoming this hurdle.
it would
So
be a weird thing, but I think someone would have to sue on behalf of probably the Senate. And they would say, wait a minute, wait a minute. The power to try impeachments and therefore the rules of jurisdiction that surround those are the plenary authority of Congress, not the executive. And to allow delegation of, or to allow the executive to make that sort of order would be an impermissible violation of the separation of powers. I mean, and it would be, um, even
if
if
that's
Biden said, I'm gonna do this and not apply it to Trump, so you get rid of the ex post facto thing. He's like, just so we're clear, I'm going to say that all future presidents can be impeached after they leave office because I have integrity, right? I have
right, right, yeah, yeah.
integrity. So
Yeah.
I
Come
I
on,
think
man.
I think they would have to challenge the constitutionality of that EO, because they would have to say, no, 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 no. The House is the sole body which can bring impeachment. The Senate is the sole body which can try them. And so we're the ones who make the jurisdictional statement. And then I think at that point, the Supreme Court goes, oh, no, no, no. We're the ones who say when an impeachment is valid at that
You would
point.
you would think so, but after their ruling in DACA, where they basically are like, well, the president can do whatever he wants to do, it seems like they gave such unfettered power to the executive branch that I don't even know. I mean,
Well, except
I'll
you,
bet you John Roberts and the other three knuckleheads will all go along with it, and I have very little faith in the people who are supposedly on the right who Trump brought in.
you also
So
forget, though, that they also said that you can do anything you want except end DACA.
right.
Look, you can make DACA all day. You can't end this thing, though, ever, because that would be unconstitutional. Starting it up is fine.
So the last point I want to make before, and then we'll get into your thing, because I'm sorry for taking too much of your time here.
Oh, you're not
So
taking too much of my time.
when I was reviewing it, so the whole issue about my breathing
Yeah.
became like a little bit of a thing there. I think someone referred to me as Darth Vader giving Lamaze classes or something,
Yeah.
something like that. And whatever. I had a few thoughts on that. I just wanted to share this with your audience, who I love and respect. I just want to say that whoever came up with that line, genius, really good, really, I was impressed. B, I'm a very deep guy. You sometimes need to just read between the lines, understand what I'm trying to say, even when I'm breathing. There's
Oh,
something
come on now.
you need to just think about what I'm saying and read between the lines, and you'll understand where I'm coming from, and you'll grow from it.
There you
The
go.
last thing I wanted to say is they inspired me. They inspired me that today I actually went and got a video capture card
Nice.
and headphones. I already have the camera and the microphone. I just can't run everything through because I don't have the video capture card. Because when I started doing this social media thing, I was so green that I was like, well, all I need is a mic and a camera. I'm good to go. And then when it wasn't really working for me, I just resorted back to my phone. But seeing
Sure.
as I want to do more live streams, I want to be on your show more, and I certainly don't want people to be distracted by my apnea. So I will.
Look, what
So
you
I've
could try,
actually,
stop breathing. Just stop
yeah,
that. Have you tried that?
right. I for many minutes at a time as a child, but yeah. So I actually have made an investment. Some of you have offered to help with that investment, and I'm not going to ask you to pay me back. I will tell you that I have a locals community now. So if you want to show me that sort of love, it's goodlogic.locals.com. A little self pimp
Hey,
right over there.
Bainling, can you share that every now and then so people know they can follow Joe on
It
locals, please? That would be
It
awesome.
it's spelled like my show name, goodlogic.locals.com. And yeah, I'm not gonna give you the promo code because you're so interested in supporting me that you don't need a promo. Just try me out. Trust me, you're gonna love it. And if you're really, really desperate for the promo code, I'll give it to you. But I'll tell you this: my first episode, my welcome video, actually is a 10-minute lesson which will teach any human how to become exceptionally popular.
Very good.
So there you go.
Is it
Yeah,
just
there you
that
go.
is it just that song from Wicked? That song Popular?
No, I don't really, never heard that song, but it's a tried and proven method that will make any human exceedingly popular. So try it out. You're gonna love it. And now now that you've given me my 15 minutes of fame, 14 minutes, I'm going to say, let's get back into the show. We got 40 pages to cover, and we're starting with a review of today. So thank you for your time. Let's go.
Uh F name L name. I want to get this one because the YouTube did this thing where I can pin a comment in the chat, but it also pins it in my super chat window, which doesn't make any sense. So it covers up the name of the top super chat, which is F name L name. And he says it's legal to break the law, but not to unbreak the law. That would break the law. Yeah.
That's about your DACA comment. Yeah, good
Yes.
job there. F name, L
Yes.
name. Oh,
Razor
that's first
says,
name, last name. That's what it is. That's what
yeah.
he's doing there. Yeah.
Razor says, betcha Trump wished he hired Marvin Garrard for his defense team. Also, rest in peace, Clark Middleton, who played Glenn Carter, aka Jelly Bean. R.I.P. to that person. I don't know what that's from, but I think I'm gonna regret saying that. It's probably from the Warriors or the Outsiders or something. I don't know. Kiwi Goes Live says, press F in chat for Larry Flint, founder of Hustler Magazine. If not for his tireless efforts to sell photographs of women's labias, we would have lost the war for freedom of speech and freedom of the press 40 years ago. Rest in power, Mr. Flint. And
People versus Larry Flint. That was a famous movie, which I
yes,
never saw, but
and
it's
make
about freedom of speech.
right, the freedom to make fun of Jerry Falwell. A very important freedom, by the way. And it is funny how that came full circle. And though Jerry Falwell is not sleeping with his mother as alleged, his son also wasn't sleeping with his son's wife. Someone else was. So that's pretty interesting to have that happen. Oh my gosh, are you familiar with that story at all? By the way,
Which story?
Jerry Falwell Jr. and his wife
Yeah.
having an affair with their pool boy. Because
I'm not a big fan of the Inquirer or CNN, so
yeah, no,
I might have missed it.
this came out because he was the dean of Liberty University for a long time, and which his dad founded, and then it's a big conservative college, and then he his pool boy basically came out and says, I've been sleeping with his wife, and he knows about it. And that's like his thing. And it was like, oh boy. Don't want to have that on your record, in my opinion, my humble opinion. So that was good times. Okay, I'm going to pull up the document on screen. We're on page 4750 on the PDF.
Was there anything important from today that we're supposed to?
I was going to ask if you how much of it you saw.
So yeah, I peeked in on your channel. I got a little bit of the end of Swalwell, and some of Madeline Dean.
Okay.
And that was about it.
Did you happen to catch the most important moment of the entire night, which happened right at the end?
No. What did I miss?
Okay, so they do 7 hours and 30 minutes or whatever of complete boring nonsense, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then Mike Lee stands up when they close their case for the day. And he says, Mr. Chairman, they attributed statements to me. And those statements are not true. I didn't make them. I want them stricken from the record. And like the Senate descends into pandemonium as they try and figure out what to do. For a little while, Pat Leahy, looking like he has no idea that he's even on Earth anymore, he gets an argument from like an aide in front of him. She hands him a paper, and their argument is basically, they did drop this to their credit, but at first the argument was, we can include things that aren't true. It's like
sounds like CNN.
Senate rule. It was like Senate rule, impeachment rule 47 or something that they're citing. And they're like, no, we can include this. And Mike Lee's like, Chair, those statements didn't happen. And they're like, what grounds do you have to object? He says, I'm the witness. I know I didn't say that. They're not true. I want them stricken. And then they don't know what to do. And so then Pat Leahy calls a roll call vote on whether or not the motion should pass. And then he's like, well, he's like, well, you're appealing the ruling. And like, but Chair, can you clarify what the ruling is? And so then the lady's like calling out the votes, and no one's voting. No one is answering her because no one knows what they're actually voting on. It was such a disaster. And then, of course,
you don't know if yay or nay is supporting or against it. You just know.
Yeah, no one. I mean, like, and it starts with like Blackburn and Booker and stuff. So you've got Democrats and Republicans, and no one knows what they're voting on. It was just a disaster. And then finally, Jamie Raskin comes up and solves the problem. He says, we're happy to withdraw those statements. They're not really that important. And Mike Lee says, you're not the one being misquoted on the record. And like, it was just this great moment. And it's like, oh my gosh, here we have these people fabricating statements. And
what else is fabricated? What else is fake? Like, now that we know this is a lie.
Let me tell you, one of the tweets that they put up in their presentation, right? Actually, two of the tweets are from this woman who is not like a big person, but she's one of the organizers of the rally. Okay. They put her tweets up, and she's got a verified blue check mark on it, right? Like on Twitter, right? She's a blue check.
Right.
She tweets today and she goes, I've never been verified on Twitter. I don't have a blue check mark. I didn't have a blue check mark then. Where'd that blue check mark come from? So, for some reason, somehow, her tweets have a blue check mark on the screenshot and they don't exist on her profile. And people were pulling, like, from her profile contemporary date tweets and she doesn't have a blue check mark, screenshots of them or whatever.
Wow.
And it's like, so they've modified the tweets? Like, why are you, what?
Yeah.
This shouldn't be difficult. Why are you doing this? All you
It's
have
like,
to do
and
is
it's
just
so funny. It's like, what pivotal statement did she make? That's like the only way we can get it is from this, by modifying and pretending that this woman who has nothing to do with us sent these tweets out. Like, what a did she say something like, yeah, I was incited by Trump? Like, what did she say that was so pivotal
she was the
to
one
their?
organizing organizing one of the rallies. I don't remember if it was a December 12th rally
So
or if
they
it was,
basically wanted to.
and Trump
Right. They would.
retweeted her. Trump retweeted her at some point, they say. But I think
Uh-huh.
I think maybe the problem is Trump's Twitter's gone. So they might have an idea of what was said, but they might have reconstructed the screenshot of the tweet from Trump if they don't have the actual screenshot.
So this brings in a best evidence thing where it's like, okay, we already know that they paid a movie theater, but they probably didn't have to pay it because Hollywood is so lefty. They probably did it for free. But they
Yeah.
got some movie production company to make to produce all this. How do we know that anything they presented was legitimately true? How do we
Yeah,
know?
and in a criminal court, the fabrication of witness statements from a witness who's there and says, I didn't make those statements, from the prosecutor in their case in chief could be grounds for a mistrial. Like that.
That's exactly what I was going to say. When Mike Lee got up there
Yeah.
and made that statement in front of everyone, we're basically saying mistrial. Let's find the brand new 100 senators for a jury.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
what do you do with
exactly.
a mistrial here?
Right. And were this a court, you can say mistrial, you can move to dismiss because it's prejudicial. You might not win that, but you might win a mistrial. And just the
Who's
idea that
voting? Who's voting for a mistrial? Which Democrats are going to say, yeah,
no,
this
no,
is
no.
a
I mean,
mistrial?
I'm saying in criminal court. In
Oh yeah,
criminal
okay,
court,
fine.
you could bring. You might not win a full dismissal based on it because they'd say, "Well, how are they prejudiced by these statements?" You say, "Well, Your Honor, we have no idea what they're manufacturing. Like they're making stuff up and just passing it off as true." First of all, this is all hearsay. Literally, all of their testimony is hearsay, which is great, except for Trump's tweets, which are statements of a party against their own interest. That's like all they can use. Everything else,
Which is an exception to hearsay.
right? It's still hearsay. They just get an exception. They don't have a single affidavit from any of the people that they're quoting. They don't have any of this stuff. It's like all these people are still alive. You can just go get them. Like just DM them on Twitter.
Yeah, say, hey, can you come in to testify?
Yeah.
That's
It's
what should be happening if they actually cared about any legitimacy. And it only goes to show that they know that this whole thing is a sham. Because if they really felt it was legitimate, I said this with impeachment 1.0, the beta version,
yeah.
um, from when Schiff was conducting that whole bogus impeachment trial. If you really felt that Trump was guilty, the way you handle that is you give the other side every opportunity to defend themselves. And you say, look, even when they try to defend themselves, they don't have anything. When you have something to hide and you want to look guilty, that's when it's like you don't want people to know anything about what's happening or the other side's perspective on things. So the way that they were running it before it even got rejected by the Senate was basically saying, we know that this is an empty claim. And it's the same thing going on here. If they ran it in a legitimate way, the way a real trial, real court would be run with like, let's get best evidence, let's do it right. But they don't care about that. They don't
No.
care about that because they basically know X people are going to vote. This subset is going to vote against, and this subset is going to vote for. And then we got like this little middle ground here of other people. And we're just going to end up bitching about it afterwards for the next couple of years about how evil the other side is. And that's what they basically, that's why this is not about removing Trump. It's purely, and the more I think about it, it's purely about sending a message to MAGA and trying to drop the hammer on them and scare and scare people, and also sway America into thinking that Republicans and conservatives are really evil people. It's their chance to basically put on display, here are the crazy run amok, that all of MAGA is QAnons, who are crazy people who will rush into the Capitol, try and kill people if we don't put them in chains. And
Right.
it gives justification, and that's what this is about. That's totally what this is about. Trump was completely truthful when he said, "This is not about me. This is about you. I'm just in their way," and that's what this is.
Angry Baneling, stand by and stand down or whatever. Stand down and stand by.
Proud Boys. Oh
No.
yeah, Proud Boys. Stand
Uh,
by, stand down.
so yeah, and I think you're right. It's a show trial. They know it's a show trial. If you're really trying to impeach someone, I mean, you think about, I think the trial of Bill Clinton took something like 86 days or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. That was a really, really long, drawn out thing.
Yeah,
I wasn't as involved with politics back then. Even though I was old enough to
I was
care
gonna
about
say
it.
me either.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Back,
was,
yeah. What were you like?
I was oh God, let's see.
You were in Little League back
What year
then.
was that?
That was like
90,
97.
97. Oh, okay. I would have been 15, 16 years old, something like that.
Right.
So, but still a little bit out of the game on that one. I certainly wasn't a lawyer yet, so that's important.
I was.
Oh,
And oh no, no, I wasn't. I'm sorry. I actually graduated. I was in law school. I graduated in '98 and was admitted in '99.
yeah, there
So
you go. Yeah, I think that there was a question in the chat that says what can be done to stop this tomorrow. Unfortunately, this is an impeachment, so there's not really anything you can do about it. I
all
mean,
you could do is turn the TV off. That's all you
yeah,
can do.
and the Republicans could complain about it, and they maybe should just say, "Hey, you guys are just because it's a show, because it's a
Mhm.
show, you guys are fabricating the evidence." There you
It'd
go.
be really awesome if Josh Hawley would just start like screaming in the middle, "Boo!"
Yeah, that would be good. He should just do that all the time, every few minutes, and just annoy the hell out of them. That would be great.
You know that if it was the other way, if it was Republicans impeaching Democrats, there would totally be someone doing that from the other side. I
Yeah,
mean, there's no level they won't sink to. So
yeah, it's crazy. But I thought that was the big takeaway. I do want to point out that all these people are calling for the disbarment of Sidney Powell over fabricating evidence and submitting it to a trial. I'm just saying, if we're being even-handed here, these lawyers have submitted fabricated evidence to Congress. That is literally a breach of your ethical obligation and is disbarable offense. But you know, if the right played dirty, they would all have a flood of ethics complaints tomorrow. But
who let me ask you this.
yeah,
Who has a legitimate right to file a complaint about saying that someone should be disbarred? Could anyone, because in theory, could you or I contact whoever was presenting this evidence, contact them and try and seek to have them disbarred for putting up um, flawed evidence, for willfully putting up evidence that they knew was improper and not legitimate, valid evidence, and try and get them disbarred? Is that a complaint that you or I could file?
my understanding is we could, although my further understanding, based on the ethics complaints I've received, um, which I'm sure I have way more than you. So take that. That's one of my crowning achievements. None of them from clients and none of them related to my legal work, all explicitly related to YouTube. But the way
It's all Martin Bedick.
yeah, the way the Minnesota handles ethics complaints is if you're not in a case, if you're not a party or a client, then they don't really care. The
Mhm.
behavior has to be especially egregious, but anybody can file them. Now, I mean that's not how I get down, so I don't really look into it that much. Um, but
No,
in
I
these,
think it's a slimy move.
yeah,
It's a completely slimy move. But that doesn't mean that on both sides there aren't some slimy people who would do something like that.
well, right, and that's what's been going on. That's what happened to like every Trump attorney. Was there was some weirdo congressman who filed an ethics complaint against something like 50 different attorneys across the country who worked on Trump's suits. This is before the suits were even dismissed. Just when they got filed, he filed ethics complaints for undermining the Constitution or whatever. So I think, and I don't think any of those had any impact, but in theory, anybody can file them. I think in this case, Mike Lee, personally, being misrepresented, having a factual basis for saying that this is a false statement that was attributed to me by this attorney, I think he has a good case.
Yeah.
Maybe Castor and Schoen would have a case as well. Say because it's opposing counsel, they could do it. I don't think they're going. I don't think anybody's going to. But I think
No.
those are the best candidates as far as I can tell. Maybe Trump, but if I
Yeah,
were him,
Trump. I think Trump. I would think Trump would for sure.
if he wasn't Trump, yes. But considering he'd be asking a board of lawyers to review discipline that was averse to him, I really don't. I don't think that would work for him in this instance. In any
Yeah.
other instance, like same exact circumstances, but not Donald Trump, I think he would have it. But I don't think they would give him any play.
Okay.
So,
So when you're reading now, by the way, which I assume you're going to do the super chats and then we're going to start reading. Is that what we're going to do?
yep, there's 2 chats and then we'll read.
Right. Because so I'm gonna mute myself so that my breathing doesn't become like the fly on Pence's head. Okay.
Okay, sounds good. Blaine 20 says hashtag we stand with Gina. Yes, I'm not talking about this really tonight, but Gina Carano was let go from Lucasfilm because of cancel culture, a very, very dumb decision for them to get rid of a very popular character and further alienate their audience. Bruce Castor says, so then I put an onion on my belt, as was the style at the time. Anyway, how about how good my opponents are doing? Thank you, Bruce Castor.
That's an Abe Simpson reference.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
That's awesome.
The old man stories.
Yeah. Back in my day, we had groundy fruit. He was great.
Yeah,
Abe is one of the 3 best characters on that show.
One of my favorite little scenes in The Simpsons is when Bart is working the front at the brothel. This is back when The Simpsons was funny and before it got like overtly political. But Bart was working the front desk at the brothel, and Grandpa Simpson walks in, hangs his hat on the hook, turns around, grabs his hat, puts it back on, and walks right back outside. It's like, oh, that was great. Okay, let's do this. We're on page 47. This is subheading 3 right at the top of the page.
All right, let's go.
Mr. Trump's speech was fully protected by the First Amendment. Mr. Trump engaged in constitutionally protected political speech that the House has improperly characterized as incitement of insurrection. The attempt of the House to transmute Mr. Trump's speech, core free speech under the First Amendment, into an impeachable offense cannot be supported, and convicting him would violate the very Constitution the Senate swears to uphold. House Resolution 24 contains only 1 article of impeachment, incitement of insurrection. The allegations made there's another typo. The allegations made in that article are that Mr. Trump engaged in speech of various kinds concerning a public political event, the presidential election of November 2020. Specifically, House Resolution 24 focuses upon Mr. Trump's speech on January 6, 2021. The article also discusses in passing other statements of Mr. Trump, as well as a telephone call to the Secretary of State of Georgia. The fatal flaw of the House's arguments is that it seeks to mete out governmental punishment, impeachment, based on political speech that falls squarely within broad protections of the First Amendment. Speech in association for political purposes is the kind of activity to which the First Amendment offers its strongest protection, and they're citing New York Times versus Sullivan there. Is there something, Joe?
No, I just had my daughter walk in.
Oh, okay, I saw a hand signal. I'm like, uh-oh.
No, it wasn't at you. No, my daughter just walked in, so I was like,
Thought you were telling me to read between the lines there.
Wait, maybe you mistook what I was saying. I wasn't trying to say anything subtle there.
Yeah. Restrictions placed on freedom of speech are evaluated, quote, against the background of a profound national commitment to the principle that debate on public issues should be uninhibited, robust, and wide open, and that it may well include vehement, caustic, and sometimes unpleasantly sharp attacks on government and public officials. Thus, our First Amendment decisions have created a rough hierarchy in the constitutional protection of speech in which core political speech occupies the highest, most protected position. That's Watts versus United States. And take note, Linwood, you will be quoting that very soon in your in the ongoing motion to remove you from your New York pro hoc vice status. The Supreme Court has further acknowledged that, quote, the language of the political arena is often vituperative, abusive, and inexact.
Vituperative.
Vituperative.
Yeah.
Okay. I've never
And that's
actually seen
actually,
that word.
yeah. And so, a lawyer I worked for the first couple of years out of law school, who taught me how to write letters that would just crush any human's soul. So he was really good at throwing in a 5-syllable word every once in a while, and that was one that I learned from him, vituperative, which basically, as I recall, means something like just like aggressively hostile.
Sure. That's a good
All
word.
right,
It's
that's beyond SAT level. I think that's like
yeah. That's
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 like
GRE
snobby.
level or whatever.
That's snobby professor level. Like,
Yeah. Very good. Uh A rule of law permitting criminal or civil liability to be imposed upon those who speak or write on public issues and their superintendents would lead to self-censorship by all which would not be relieved by permitting a defense of truth. Under such a rule, would-be critics of official conduct may be deterred from voicing their criticism, even though it is believed to be true and even though it is in fact true, because of doubt whether it can be proved in court or fear of the expense of having to do so. The rule thus dampens the vigor and limits the variety of public debate. This is the chilling effect on the First Amendment, is what they're referring to here. In only a few well-defined and narrowly limited classes of speech may the government punish an individual for his or her words. Even political speech that may incite unlawful conduct is protected from the reach of governmental punishment. Indeed, every idea is an incitement, and if speech may be suppressed whenever it might inspire someone to act unlawfully, then there is no limit to the state's censorial power. The government may not prohibit speech because it increases the chance an unlawful act will be committed at some indefinite future time. Rather, the government may only suppress speech for advocating the use of force or a violation of law if, quote, such advocacy is directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action and is likely to incite or produce such action. Okay, so brief comments about this. They heavily focused on the likelihood of inciting the action today. That was the highlight of their argument. And they, for what it's worth, they tried to make that case pretty well, saying that Donald Trump's words were likely going to cause a riot based on what was happening.
mhm.
The problem that they have is the first part of that statement, which is it has to direct to incite or produce the imminent lawless action. It has to ask someone to do the thing. You can't just like, I gave the analogy earlier. If I'm just talking about cheeseburgers and you brought me a cheeseburger, I may have incited you to bring me a cheeseburger, but I wasn't directing you to bring me one. Like I'm just
Well,
talking about it. Yeah, go ahead.
they would respond back that he said, we're gonna fight like hell because that's what we do, and that is direction. That's what the left will try and get around that problem.
Right. Right. And they're going to have a hard time because saying an idiom like we're going to fight like hell isn't a command to go do an imminent lawless action. Like,
Well, make no mistake about it. I mean,
yeah,
there's absolutely no chance on God's green earth that if this was actually in front of a judge, and any judge, the most liberal judge who hated Trump, and this was brought up on a criminal charge, there's no chance that this would not be dismissed.
right.
I mean, it's insane to think otherwise, which is why. And the problem is that since they're looking to just appeal to the court of public opinion, they don't care about that. They just want to make people think that this is something that would actually stand up in a court of law, and that's why he must be impeached, because obviously they were incited by him. I mean, it's so obvious. And when they're preaching to their choir, which is basically anyone who watches MSNBC, so they're basically, anything they say that is what he's trying to direct them to do. I mean, bear in mind, this is millions of people who actually believe that people on the right are all sheep. That's what when we think about them, they think about us. That we're all
Right.
sheep, that we all suckers for his message, that we have a crazy worship of Trump, and that we put him on this pedestal where we look at him like he's a messianic figure, which is ironic because I think there's a very small percentage of MAGA which look at him that way. There's a much greater percentage of people who put Obama on that messianic type of pedestal.
Oh yeah,
Um,
the waters will recede. Sun will
Yeah,
shine and the
yeah.
waters will recede.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, there are pharaohs who are envious of the amount of love and respect and admiration, the godlike status that he still holds in the hearts of millions of people on the left. Far beyond the recognition or admiration that people in MAGA generally tend to have of Trump.
Right.
But their perspective is that that's how, and that there's almost like these dog whistles. They always use the term dog whistle. I never even heard of dog whistles until the left brought up, like, yeah, this is obvious dog whistles. I actually the first time I heard it was probably around when Clinton was in office, that this is a clear dog whistle telling them that it's okay to beat up black people. This is a clear dog whistle saying now you should go in here. The only one who hears these dog whistles are people who are they themselves are like the racists or the crazies who are constantly attuned to dog whistles. It's like you and
Right.
I, we're normal people. We don't take words and then construe them as implying something else, but they think we're construing it, and because we hold him as a messianic figure, that we're actually following through on it. And the next thing you know, when he says fight like hell, he actually means that we need to have 1,000 people charge through the front doors of the Capitol. That's how, in their brain, they really believe that.
Yes.
Even though there's no one from MAGA who thinks that way. I mean, literally, like no one thinks like, oh, because Trump said it and he was implying it, it must be this is what he wants to do. This is his direction. This is why we have to do it. So while it's insane and it's so far from reality, it's been drilled for years and years by the left that this is what millions of MAGA people are really like. And
Right.
that's why they think that this, they genuinely believe in America, there are many, many people genuinely believe that, yeah, this was a manifestation of their love and admiration for that. And that if he tells them to fight like hell, that he knows they're going to take it literally, and he means to trigger them. And that's exactly what happened. And that's why you do have a lot of people on the left who genuinely believe he should be impeached, because this is something he was the puppet master and we were all his helpless idiots. And not realizing that no, even people who did go in there, they didn't actually want to hurt anyone. There was no one there saying, there was no bloodlust. I mean, when I heard about the police officer Sicknick who got hurt, I was like, I was shocked, because all the videos I saw, it seemed like it was like a trip in the park. It was like, where's the teacher who's telling them, okay, we're going to go over to the west wing of the Capitol, whatever they have there.
Right.
And you know what I'm saying? Like, to me, it seemed like almost harmless and innocent and
Yeah,
just almost like
it's like there were
amusing.
two riots going on. There was one where there's the guys like walking casually into the hall of, Congress, and the cops like, "Hey, I'm going to need you guys to like get out of here at some point." And they're like, "Yeah, we'll leave in a few minutes." Like it's this weird sort of jovial attitude. That's where the QAnon shaman is. And then there is the other part where you do see, like, they showed the video of some of the stuff, and I mean, some of that stuff was really, really intense. You got the guy getting crushed against the wall. You've got like a battle line of cops and a battle line of people, and riot shields smashing back and forth, and flagpoles being thrown, and people getting pepper sprayed. Like, so there was that.
Right.
That was happening. But then
Right.
over here, there's like the cops are just kind of standing by and people are walking past, and you're like, well, this looks so different. Like, how are these two worlds coexisting? I don't get it.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, my point is that's why a lot of people on the left really believe it, and that's why they think there really was incitement here. And I think for most people on the right, they're like, what are you talking about? Like, none of us heard this message from him that you think we were hearing and just following blindly. Like, no one's even thought he's trying to send a message like that. Like, where are you even hearing it? And that's why there's such a disconnect here, and so much friction in our country, is because there's such a disconnect about the message that's being given and the message that's being received. I think from leaders on both sides and from the recipients on both sides. When we look at the other side, how we look at them, and when we look at ourselves, how we look at ourselves. I think that neither side is really seeing accurate reflections of what's happened. So that's
Right.
just my thoughts on it. Yeah.
All right, so back to the bottom, and they're going to Brandenburg here, which is, I mean, this is the landmark case on incitement. I mean, so
Yep.
it's gonna come up. In Brandenburg versus Ohio, the Supreme Court formed a test that placed even speech inciting illegal conduct within the protection of the First Amendment. In that case, a leader of the Ku Klux Klan was convicted under an Ohio criminal syndicalism law. Evidence of his incitement was a film of the events at a Klan rally, which included racist and anti-Semitic speech, the burning of a large wooden cross, and several items that appeared in the film, including a number of firearms. The leader of the protests proclaimed that, quote, "We're not a revengeant organization, but if our president, our Congress, our Supreme Court continues to suppress the white Caucasian race, it's possible there might be some revenge taken. We are marching on Congress July the 4th, 400,000 strong." The court held that the constitutional guarantees of free speech and free press do not permit the government to forbid or prescribe advocacy of the use of force or of law violation, except where such advocacy is directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action and is likely to incite or produce such action. The court explained that the mere abstract teaching of the moral propriety or even moral necessity for a resort to force and violence is not the same as preparing a group for violent action and stealing it to such action. And just for a moment, they picked about the most tame line they could from the Brandenburg speech. It's the one that doesn't have the N-word in it. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
well,
like, it's literally like the one line that doesn't talk about hanging black people and stuff like that. This is this was a very, very violent speech, like as violent as speeches can get without having actual violence occur. And so I think that, they picked this line, but the reason they picked this line is because they're talking about marching on Congress. Like that's
right.
the strategic thing here. We're marching on Congress July the 4th, 400,000 strong. That's not incitement. So how can Trump say marching on the Capitol building would be incitement? But
But you're
there,
touching on a really interesting legal strategy question that if I was sitting there in the room with Castor and this thing is being drafted, that I would actually think, and let's say the N-word was used in here. Obviously, that's a very electric word. That's a
right.
word which, as soon as it comes out of anyone's mouth, or even see it on paper, it just sort of everyone just sort of stiffens, and there's a whole reaction to that word, which is interesting. It's a reflection of our times, and I'm only saying that only because I think that the best way to nullify a racial epithet is to not make it so powerful.
Yeah,
I think
that's
like
always
I
been
like I
my
actually
confusion. Like we're
yeah
so scared of this word.
right.
You're
And I'll tell
making
you the
it that.
interesting thing
Yeah.
is now when black people use amongst each other, ironically, it's a reflection of like kinship that they're basically calling themselves, my N with an A on the end of it.
Right.
And some of them even say ER on the end of it. And that's a reflection of like, no, this is like my brother. This is a person I respect. And that's taking the word back from real, from evil racists who are using it in a racist way. And you're almost converting the word, which is far better than making it a taboo, like the word. Instead of doing it like that, if you actually take the word back and you make it into something that's not offensive, but it's actually a compliment. They actually say that if I'm going to refer to someone as my N word with an, certainly that if I called you that,
Yeah.
in other words, and that became a word which is a reference to like being like you're my brother. Like
Right.
that's not something that you're stealing the word. Now it's like racists can't even use that word anymore because like when they say it, it's like it's an act of friendship. So that's the best way to defeat racism is to actually steal their language from them instead of making it this massive taboo. And I think that left got that completely wrong on this. But the strategy, that question I raised this for is, I mean, think about this. If there was in this quote the N word, would you say, okay, we need to delete it, we need to dot it, we should leave it out altogether, we should just skip over those five words just because it's distracting? Or would you feel like, no, this actually proves the point that much more? No matter how offensive the word is, you can use it.
I think it really depends on the case. I think for them, they got gifted this line where they said we're going to march on Congress.
Right.
So it lets them avoid it. I think had they used the line in here, they run the risk of associating Trump with using racial epithets.
That's a
Uh,
yeah. That's a,
and
that's a good that's a good call. That's a
and
good
so I,
call.
I
Yeah, I didn't think
think
about that because he's called a racist. They wouldn't want to use that word.
yeah, so I think in this case it would not be good to use a line with the N-word in it. In other cases, like if your especially if your defendant is black, for example, I think you would
Hmm.
use it. I think you would use it a lot and say, look, we protect the most heinous speech against my client right here in this.
Hmm.
Here it is in all of its awful, ugly glory.
Hmm.
Here's this word, this text. I apologize, Your Honor, for the language of the court, but this is the language of protected speech. And then you go
Right.
ahead and run it off and say, how could what my client said be worse than that? You know, you
Yeah.
just drop you
Yeah.
like that. I think those are the types of things that that's when you use it for sure. Otherwise, I think the way courts are now and the way people are in there, I think ellipses are probably what you're wanting to do most of the time, or brackets, bracket and replace like offensive slang or something.
Offensive term.
Like
Insert offensive term.
like if you got a bunch of white people in the courtroom or whatever, and one light-skinned court reporter, you definitely don't want to drop an N-word even as part of a quote. I think that's optics 101. But
Yeah.
okay, but yeah, I wanted to point out though they did pick about the most tame line from Brandenburg. The amount of speech that's protected in this involved literally calling for the death of a race of people. And because there were none around to imminently kill, they're like, yeah, but they can express that they don't like these people. And it's like, wow.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's how strong this is protected. Um,
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, it's a powerful thing, and it's probably it's I would say it's the right call. I think everything about the Brandenburg decision. I mean, it makes the most sense. You're giving the widest berth to First Amendment, and that's how it should be. I think that's what the founders had in mind. That even if it's offensive, that's how you promote growth and exchange of ideas. Is if you have the ability to that everyone can freely express themselves and how they feel and what they're thinking, and this way, they're sort of bang heads against others, and that's how you evolve as a human. And I
Right.
think that's good
And
for society.
I mean, right now there's a crisis going on at I think the New York Times, because a couple years ago, one of their highly regarded staff writers, this is the New York Times too, so remember that. He was on a trip and someone asked him something about the N-word and why, like what they should do or when it's appropriate to use in like a professional writing, when they're reporting on facts or whatever. And so in the course of it, he actually said it. He
Hmm.
dropped the word, talking about, this word it means this and this is how you handle it. And now because of that thing he did 2 years ago or 4 years ago or whatever, he was fired. And so it's like, but he wasn't saying this word in any offensive way at all. It's like Papa
Right.
John, right? When they asked Papa John like to utilize like how to handle this word and to use it, and then he does, like he tells them, and then they complain that he used the N-word. And he's like, "You asked me to in the meeting that we're in." So anyway, it's a very weird thing. Okay, thus, under Brandenburg and its progeny, government actors may not, quote, forbid or prescribe advocacy of the use of force of law or of law violation, except where such advocacy is directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action and is likely to incite or produce such action. Absent an imminent threat, therefore, it is expressly within the First Amendment to advocate for the use of force. Similarly, it is protected speech to advocate for violating the law. And as Mr. Trump did neither of these things, his speech at all times fell within First Amendment protections. He thus cannot be subject to conviction by the Senate under well-established First Amendment jurisprudence. The article of impeachment cherry picks Mr. Trump's phrases from an hour-long speech and indeed other speeches before other audiences. But even looked at through the lens of House Resolution 24, the incitement alleged is sterile and thin. The House's case for incitement simply fails to pass constitutional muster. First, Mr. Trump unambiguously advocated to the crowd at the January 6, 2021 event that he expected peaceful behavior. He explicitly stated, "I know that everyone here will soon be marching over the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard." Indeed, after reports of violence at the Capitol, Mr. Trump issued a public video statement urging the crowd at the Capitol to go home in peace and further pleading, "We have to have peace. We have to have law and order. We have to respect our great people in law and order. We don't want anyone hurt." Mr. Trump's explicit disavowal of violence and calls for peace both directly before and after the riot, and his urge to have the participants use their voices as opposed to other action cannot be ignored. Given these express statements, and for the fact that the First Amendment protects elected public officials who disclaim violence or violations of the law, the inquiry need go no further. Mr. Trump incited no insurrection, and his speech as a whole, despite all the rhetoric in House Resolution 24, cannot support a conviction because the First Amendment protected him at all times from government retribution. Second, the House's heavy reliance on Mr. Trump's metaphorical fighting language is completely devoid of context, which, when considered as a whole, places Mr. Trump's speech entirely within the protections of the First Amendment. The thrust of the House's allegation against Mr. Trump is that he said, in the context of election security generally, that, quote, if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. To characterize this statement alone as incitement to insurrection is to ignore wholesale the remainder of Mr. Trump's speech that day, including his call for his supporters to peacefully make their voices heard. What is more, a closer examination of the text of Mr. Trump's speech reveals he makes references to fighting in the plainly figurative sense. For example, the metaphor of boxing permeated Mr. Trump's speech. He expressly referred to the sport in his speech, associating it with the word fighting. Republicans are constantly fighting like a boxer. With his hands tied behind his back, it's like a boxer. The House cannot seriously argue that Mr. Trump's use of the word fighting in this speech incited an insurrection. Given this usage, it is not merely couched in the language of a simile, like, but it describes a position of physical disadvantage. It is far from a prescription for future violent action. Mr. Trump used the word fights in the figurative sense of arguing or putting forth an extreme effort, just as he did a short time later. Speaking of Rep. Jordan, when he was speaking of Rep. Jordan, there's so many weak Republicans. We have great ones, Jim Jordan, and some of these guys, they're out there fighting the House. Guys are fighting, but it's incredible. Mr. Trump again used the word fighting, but Rep. Jordan was not punching any of his fellow representatives. Jordan needs to get on that. That's just lazy. Why isn't he punching these people?
He's a former wrestler.
Yeah.
I mean, if anyone's going to be fighting, that's the guy you want, right? I mean,
yeah.
The truth is, Gates looks like he could probably handle himself okay. If you were thinking about who was going to go out there, but
Gates,
you don't want Devin Nunes is going to get beaten up by AOC. We don't want that,
right?
So
Ted Cruz is going to slink into the background, and people will just be dead with notes left on them. So I mean, that's fine. Be like,
I think the Babylon Bee said he tried killing her with his finger guns. That was still good. They've gotten better than Babylon Bee, actually.
My favorite thing Ted Cruz ever did was when he sent the Zodiac note for Halloween on Twitter. He just tweeted out the Zodiac note. It's like, oh no. He's too he's become self-aware of the meme.
He has cut look, 4 years ago in 2016, he was like a lost deer. And ever since Trump took office, he's gotten to be a far more likable conservative than he ever was when he tried running for president.
You know what happened, right?
What?
He grew the beard.
Is that what it's? The beard does definitely. It's part of the whole alpha thing.
It disarmed his opponents because he was naked faced all the time. Because you're arguing in front of the Supreme Court, like you got to be clean shaven. He had kind of the chubby lower jaw, cheeks, and his face is always kind of weird because of that. Then he grew that beard. He wrapped bacon around a gun barrel and fired it enough to cook the bacon. Like, he became cool in like a span of 3 months. It was amazing. He took a class on how to be cool from somebody. I'm not going to say it was me, because that would be a violation of my client's rights to privacy.
Nice. I like it. And the fact that you wouldn't reveal it, that's why people should hire you, because you're that discreet.
Exactly.
That's pretty impressive.
Exactly. But okay, back to this. Mr. Trump referred to Rep. Jordan's advocacy efforts. This is entirely consistent with yet another use of the word in reference to action at the ballot box, not violence. Unbelievable. What we have to go through, and you have to get your people to fight. If they don't fight, we have to primary the hell out of the ones that don't fight. You primary them. We're going to let you know who they are. I can already tell you, frankly. Again, Mr. Trump used the word fight in the sense of forceful argument and combined it with a plainly nonviolent request. He sought a change in the occupants of Congress through future primary elections, not through violence. None of this constituted anything from which a conviction may follow. Mr. Trump's speech on January 6th was protected political speech, that which receives the strongest protection under the First Amendment when the protections of free speech are at their highest. In fact, under Brandenburg, there is no doubt that the words upon which the article of impeachment issued could never support a conviction, as there was plainly no advocacy of lawless action, and the words as
Another typo.
oh,
Did you?
where's that? I missed this one.
Yeah, that they said no doubt that it could never.
Oh
Wait,
yeah, there's
no
no
doubt that
doubt
it could ever.
the words
It should
upon
be they
which the
could.
article of impeachment could never support a conviction. Right.
It should be ever. Wait, there's
Yeah.
no doubt. Oh, could not ever. There's no. That's just. You're right. It's actually correct. It's just
It's
clumsy.
correct. It's ugly. It's a bad
It's
syntax
clumsy.
there, but I wouldn't write it that way. Let's see.
Right. Right.
As there was
All right.
plainly no advocacy of lawless action, and the words as stated can hardly be interpreted to be likely to incite imminent violence or lawless action. Neither can the other allegations in the article of impeachment support a conviction, given Mr. Trump's plain and clear First Amendment protection. The allegations of other statements alleged to contribute to an incitement of insurrection are bereft of detail, and even as expanded upon in the House manager's trial memorandum, amount to no more than Mr. Trump's advocating his position that he won the presidential election in November 2020. But see, this is what pisses them off. They want him to stop saying that he won the election. They're really mad that he can't just go around saying he won the election. Well, why not? Like, I won the election of 2020.
So
I had 106 million votes. Joe Biden has
in one
nothing on me.
in one of my Good Logic locals videos, so I actually was addressing this mistake that Trump made in all of his election campaigning and his framing, and how he lost the fight before it started, because what he should have basically pointed out, and this I don't remember really hearing anyone phrase it quite like this. People kept saying, you're trying to overdo the election, unturn the election. When you're asking for an audit, you're trying to undo the election. No, that's not what he was trying to do. And it should have been phrased exactly like this. On November 3rd, we had 50 states that were all gray. Some of them went red, some of them went blue, without there being any question about whether or not they went from red to blue. They went from gray to blue or from gray to red. Each of them were going from gray to something.
Right.
You want to say that these 6 states went from gray to blue? There's questions about whether or not that's true. So prove it. It starts gray. It stays gray until you prove it. Not that it's blue and now we have to prove that it's not blue. It's still gray. Until you prove it through an audit, not a recount, but until you prove it through an audit, it's gray.
Right.
And it was never phrased quite like that. It's always like, well, Trump is saying that there was fraud. No, I'm saying you haven't proven. It's not that I have to prove that there's no fraud. You have to prove that there's no fraud if you want to get it out of gray. Otherwise, it's gray. Until you prove there's no fraud, it's gray. And it never was really phrased in that way. It was always Trump having to undo what happened, or he's trying to undo what happened. He's like, no, I'm trying to make sure that what is going to be done is something and to take it from gray to blue is something that you actually can establish is what happened.
Right.
And I think that's changing the whole nature of the fight, where you put them on the defensive rather than us being on the defensive, when we have absolutely no control over what's happening. You're the one who has the control. Is the easiest opportunity to prove whether it's blue or red, that it went from gray to blue. You have the control. You know how you do it? You do your audit, and that's how we actually know it. Until that happens, it's gray, because we never got out of November 3rd status of it's gray. And it was never quite phrased like that. It was always about Trump trying to undo what happened, as opposed to him saying, I'm not undoing what happened. I'm trying to verify that anything happened, because for all we know, it's still gray. Maybe there was an exact tie. How do we know it wasn't? Until you prove there wasn't an exact tie by doing an audit, that's how we know.
Right.
And if you phrase it that way, that's how you win the fight, by making them the ones, put the burden of proof on them, not on yourself.
Yeah, and having that audit out in the open with the data reviewable by everybody, open source review of the data. I mean, that was the big problem with Georgia. Was they're like, just give us access to the data so we can verify. You're telling us that we're wrong, but you're not telling us how we're wrong. You're just saying that we are. Just let us see why we're wrong. Well, we don't have to give that to you. That's not helpful. That's not
Right.
remedying the situation. What harm is there in you giving us this data? Like what?
Yeah, apparently at 5 a.m. the other night, the Chiefs won the Super Bowl, but like no one saw it. Just trust us, that's what happened.
Yeah. What are you gonna believe? Well, me or your
Right.
lying eyes?
And the idea, but the idea is that really where you put the battle, that decides at the outset who's going to win, who's going to lose. And he was starting from a position of weakness by saying that no, what you did here was, well, this vote here is wrong. You don't say the vote here is wrong. You say you have to prove that your vote is right in order for us to have any vote.
Yeah. Lost Bullet says getting taught lessons in Cool by Nick Rekieta is like Bernie Sanders teaching someone how to live on a tight budget.
Wait, that's a compliment to you. I don't know if he meant it as a compliment. I think he was trying to like dig at you, but he accidentally gave you a compliment that is like, because obviously Bernie would be the guy you would go to if you want to know how to live on a tight budget. So you're the guy to go to if you want to learn
He
how to
has
be
like
cool.
4 houses that are all like $1 million.
Right. And apparently he only makes a nickel.
The state gave me everything I needed. Uh, all right, here we go. The allegation that Mr. Trump should be convicted for incitement of insurrection based upon the telephone call to the Georgia Secretary of State rests on even shakier ground. The allegations of threats of death and violence come not from Mr. Trump at all. They come from other individuals from the internet, not identified nor identifiable in the House trial memorandum, who took it upon themselves to make inane internet threats which were not urged or incited by Mr. Trump in any way, shape, or form. Examining the discussion with the Georgia Secretary of State under the standard of incitement leads to the same conclusions as the January 6 statements of Mr. Trump. There's nothing said by Trump that urges use of force or law violation directed to producing imminent lawless action. Even the House manager's sinister and selective summary of Mr. Trump's call cannot meet the standard for incitement. The analysis of the Supreme Court in Hess versus Indiana makes this apparent. The question is not, as the House managers seek to frame it, whether Mr. Trump's call offends the House's sensibility. It is whether the call, which is plainly political speech in the sense that Woods concerns political speech, no different than the sheriff letter to the grand jurors, is outside the First Amendment based on the limited classes of speech beyond its ambit. Mr. Trump's call was not obscene, nor did it contain fighting words nor incitement. It was a political call, and such political speech must receive the highest protection afforded under the First Amendment. And this is a good argument. I like that they call out how badly edited that call was.
Yeah.
Because anybody who read the transcript or listened to the call knows that the framing of the call as Trump is trying to get Raffensperger to manufacture votes illegally is absolutely ludicrous. Like that is
Yeah,
a
if you actually listen to
ludicrous
the full
charge.
hour long, yeah, if you and anyone could listen to the full hour long thing. So and that's why this, I mean, that argument is another argument which is aimed at the American people, not at senators, because senators know about the call. They know that how empty the charge is, that he was trying to like, get him to ship votes. It's even such a stupid claim. I mean, after the position that Raffensperger took throughout November, November into December, to assume that in late December, early January, whenever it was he made that call, that he would manage to convince Raffensperger to cheat on his behalf. After Raffensperger basically had spent the last 6 to 8 weeks saying Biden won Georgia, Biden won Georgia, Biden won Georgia.
Right.
That now, because he gets a phone call from President Trump, that Trump actually is stupid enough that he would think that Raffensperger would cheat for him, and that he would, and also that he's going to advise this or ask for him to cheat in front of like 20 people on the phone call.
4 of them being
It's
lawyers, some of them being Raffensperger's lawyers.
Yeah, exactly. That's what he was actually trying to get him to do. You need to be have your head so deeply enraptured into like completely leftist media to believe that that's what his agenda was. Because sometimes he's like this genius who's controlling people, and other times he's the biggest moron on earth. It's like whichever perspective of him will feed our narrative of the day. That's what we're going to claim is the real story about Donald Trump. That he's either the biggest idiot or the biggest mad genius with his his four-dimensional mind games,
Right.
which, by the way, some people on the right actually, they actually believe that trust the plan. They're still trusting the plan, but he's just a normal guy. I mean, he's not a normal guy, but he's just a typical guy who's a pretty smart guy. And in certain areas he's a genius. In other areas he's an insecure man who is not really a very good loser. And yeah, but otherwise he's pretty normal guy. He's not some mad genius, but they paint him
Yeah.
like he's an idiot. He's
Right.
either an idiot or he's a genius, depending on which one will feed our anti-Trump story today.
Right. Which it never makes sense. It never makes sense to have an idiot genius. Unless it's a literal idiot savant, right? Like who's
Right.
dumb at
As far as
everything but good at one thing.
oh, it's Rain Man. Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
he can count like 4,000 things and
a lot of
blink of an
toothpicks,
eye.
226 toothpicks. Uh, the events of January 6th at the Capitol were terrible. The loss of life of any citizen, let alone a member of the Capitol Police, is a tragedy. But impeaching a former president is not the answer. The Senate should vote to clear Mr. Trump of any wrongdoing. The hostile reaction of the crowd does not transform protected speech into incitement. Whoa! Sword and scale, what the hell, man? That's a huge chat. Cheers back to you, good sir. How you doing, buddy? Watching this.
What do we get? What do we get? What do we get?
Sword and Scale said a $500 super chat.
That's me. It's not you. It's me.
That's you? Okay.
Just understand that, and it's my gift to you. I mean, I'm not the one who paid it. I'm not
Right.
Sword Scales. He's obviously a far more generous individual than I am.
But Sword and Scale is a true crime podcast. Probably the first true crime podcast before Serial was a thing. Sword and Scale, baby.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Very popular podcast. And Mike is the guy who's like the owner of it. He's very cool. We had a discussion at the beginning of COVID, but I haven't really talked to him much since. And I need to. Because
well, thank you, Sword and Scale.
Yeah, thanks, man.
You just convinced him that he really should bring me back more often.
Yeah, there you go. This will happen every time you're on. So, thanks a bunch, buddy. Okay. Let's see. Where were we? The Senate should vote to clear Mr. Trump of any wrongdoing. The hostile reaction of a crowd does not transform protected speech into incitement. What matters is the objective meaning of the words. Courts do not deem speech unprotected based on how it could possibly be contorted or misunderstood by an unreasonable listener. Rather, they engage in an objective inquiry to determine how a reasonable person would understand the words. Otherwise, speakers at public events would be put at the mercy of the unhinged reactions of their most unreasonable audience members. That is exactly what happened on January 6th, but the Senate, composed of reasonable and erudite members, can take a few minutes and read the speech themselves. And this is the important part, and this is, of course, why we can't do this. Because think about it this way. You could put a bad actor in the crowd. Like, if you want to impeach a president, Joe Biden's up there and he's like, I like Pop-Tarts and Reese's. And then you go out and you murder the guy who makes Reese's and you're like, Joe Biden was sending me dog signals. He told me to murder this guy.
Yeah.
Like, then suddenly Joe Biden's responsible. That's silly. That's a silly premise, and that's why you cannot allow the crowd's actual action to do it. It's why we use a reasonable person standard, and why we use is it reasonably imminent? Would a reasonable person be expected to understand that there's a call to a lawless action, and then that was imminent? So that's why we do it this way.
Very important. It's a very important argument.
Yeah.
And here's another thing which I noticed that Swalwell kept hitting on, and I'm sure he's not the first of the Democrats, and certainly not going to be the last of it. They talk about Trump's reaction after the Capitol was breached, as if that's somehow related to causing incitement.
Right.
So first of all, I don't know that for incitement, is there mens rea for incitement that he has to intend to cause incitement? Is that part of I don't know if Brandenburg addresses that. I think they address like, would a reasonable person be incited by this to do something with temporal and proximal, and fit the temporal and proximal requirements. But let's say I don't intend to do that. Let's say I just say something about how, look, we really need to kill those people over there, but it's not my thought. Do they need to prove mens rea? Is that an element? I don't think it is.
Let's see. Well, this is from the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals, because it's one of the first links I found that wasn't Wikipedia. No person may be convicted of incitement to riot unless the state has proved beyond a reasonable doubt each element of the crime. These elements are action and conduct that with the intent to cause, aid, or assist the initiation, continuation of a riot, urged other persons to commit the acts. and that the
So there is
defendants.
mens rea.
Yeah, there
Number
is.
two is a mens rea.
It is an intent crime. So,
Hmm.
yeah,
No, the reason I was asking that is because they keep talking about his actions after the fact as if that's reflective of incitement. And that's why I'm like, well, whatever he did 2 hours after he supposedly incited them, why is that showing that he incited them? How is that proving that he incited them? Even if he was happy after the fact, does that mean that when he made a speech 3 hours earlier, he was trying to incite them, or that maybe, okay, I wasn't trying to incite them, I wasn't thinking that, none of my words could have possibly been taken that way, but they took, but for one reason or another, now they're doing it, and that makes me happy. Does that mean that now that retroactively I can be found culpable for having the mens rea of that shows him? Maybe I guess it's indicative that at the time he gave the speech, he had the mens rea
I I
requirement.
I think they're just so dry on circumstantial evidence to prove intent, because that's what you have to do to prove intent. You have to use circumstantial evidence, because if you the only other way you're going to do it is to ask the person, and they're just going to say no. So this,
Right.
Trey Gowdy laid that out really well when he was ripping apart what's his name for not charging Hillary Clinton. He's like, "Did you have any circumstantial evidence to exculpatory evidence of her intent?" But you have to. They just don't have any circumstantial evidence to show his intent to the crowd, which is, of course, a huge failing in any criminal case. If you can't
Right.
prove an element of the crime, you're going to lose. Like, you're
Are you a
going to
Trey
lose the
Gowdy
case.
fan, by the way? Are you a Trey Gowdy fan?
Sometimes I like him. I like his style. He's
Yeah, I love his style, and I haven't think he has a very sharp mind. I don't always agree with his actions, but I think he's a very very bright guy,
yeah,
and I think that he's probably a really effective lawyer.
yeah. He was a prosecutor too. I can tell you, like, of people who would prosecute, like, who could prosecute me, I would take
He would be scary.
I would take my county attorneys over Trey Gowdy prosecuting me any day. Like, I would much rather face them than him. He sounded
Yes,
like when he would cross examine witnesses in Congress, it was brutal and efficient
yeah,
and effective.
he's a ninja with his words. He's really good. He's
Yeah,
he's a very effective. He's a very effective. He comes across like he would be a very very effective attorney.
yeah.
So.
No, I like his style. I mean, there are some issues. He's a prosecutor. I'm a defense attorney, and we probably have some disagreements on where those worlds should overlap and where the law should interact with people. I think he's probably a little more heavy-handed on enforcement of laws than I am.
Mhm.
But as far as like effective lawyering goes, he's a guy to emulate, I think.
Yeah, yeah, he
Um,
really he's a great role model for young attorneys.
right. In Brandenburg, the Supreme Court erected an extremely high bar to proving incitement. The test requires proof that the speech explicitly or implicitly encourages the use of violence or lawless action. The speaker intends that his speech will result in the use of violence or lawless action, and the imminent use of violence or lawless action is the likely result of his speech. Real quick, it's important to mention that the Brandenburg test is a test for the constitutional protected nature of the speech. The Brandenburg test is not the test of criminal liability. That's a separate test. The Brandenburg test, if you don't pass the Brandenburg test, then your speech is constitutionally protected and you cannot be punished for it. If you pass the Brandenburg test and they say that this speech is imminently likely to cause the result, it clearly directs someone to an unlawful act. They still have to prove that you intended it that way. They have to prove the mens rea of that. They have to prove that you're the speaker. They have to prove that the act that you're saying is unlawful. Like, so they still have to go through all five of those elements, even if they pass the Brandenburg test. That only eliminates, or that only checks off like two or three of those boxes for them. They would still have to go through those elements. And it's
It's a
important to note that.
it's a really important point. The Brandenburg basically is a get out of jail free card for some people, but just because you don't have that card doesn't mean you go to jail.
Right. Right. That constitutionality is that's your first defense. This shouldn't have even been brought against you. Your second defense is, well, now that it is properly brought against you, are you guilty? And Trump would still, even if he didn't pass this test, would have the theoretical defense of I'm not guilty. Although, again, I don't see how, like, if we're looking at this from a legal perspective, this should be
He
thrown.
would easily he would pass this. Yeah,
Yeah.
he would pass this test in a heartbeat. Here's a great example to manifest what you were just saying.
Right.
What Maxine Waters was saying, her statements probably don't pass the Brandenburg test. I mean,
Right.
she's saying you get in their face. I mean, she's really calling for hostility, and and the same thing that Cory Booker did when he made similar statements. That in theory might that's pushing the Brandenburg test where they probably still fall within it. But if there were people nearby,
Right. If they're next to a group of Trump staffers who are having lunch,
right, then it
that
probably would not. Then Brandenburg probably would not be a get out of jail. But that doesn't mean that she still would be considered liable for incitement.
right, because for example, let's say she doesn't know that the table next to her is full of Trump staffers and she's selling her people, or she doesn't see them right behind her. And so she's
Right,
telling her people, look, when you see those Trump staffers, you need to get out there, you need to get in their face, you need to talk to them. And then they go, yeah, Braveheart, freedom, and run over and go start attacking these people. And she looks back and she had no idea that they were there. She would have a defense if I had no intent of inciting an actual violent act here.
right.
Even though her words would likely pass, go through the Brandenburg test and say, well, if they can prove intent, you're toast. They still have to prove the intent. Um,
That's a really great distinction, and
yeah.
that was real explaining, law explaining the interwebs. Good job.
sometimes it happens. Uh,
Yeah.
the allegations against Mr. Trump unquestionably fail as a matter of law because advocacy for the use of force or lawless behavior, intent, and imminence are all absent. Thus, the doctrine of incitement has absolutely no application to this case. First, as evident from the transcript and the video of the speech in question, Mr. Trump's statements did not advocate or even mention the use of any force whatsoever. Because the mere tendency of speech to encourage unlawful acts is not a sufficient reason for banning it, it is all the more true that a statement that fails to specifically advocate for the crowd to take any action cannot constitute incitement. Indeed, Mr. Trump expressly made a specific demand in his speech that all members of the audience, all protesters, behave peacefully. As the Sixth Circuit has recognized, quote, it is not an easy task to find that speech rises to such dangerous level that it can be deemed incitement to riot. And unsurprisingly, quote, there will rarely be enough evidence to create a jury question on whether a speaker was intending to incite imminent crime. Consider Hess versus Indiana, where a protester yelled, we'll take the effing street again, to a crowd that was already agitated and resisting police. The court held that speech could not be punished. Again, like, we'll take the street. Why? And this is an interesting thing with threats. Why is that speech not punishable? Because he doesn't actually indicate a desire to commit a lawless action. Taking the street is not a violent, lawless act. You can take to the streets right now. Like, take to the streets, everybody. And you go outside and you stand in the street. That's not a lawless or violent act on its own. Now, if you say, we're going to go to the streets and we're going to beat the hell out of those cops that are standing there, different. So it's important because I've talked about this with the Lucas Gerhard case. Threats of violence and incitement must have a particular and specific criminal
Specificity.
Yeah, a criminal element to them. They can't be inferred. You can't infer incitement. It doesn't work that way. It's too protected. In a good way.
Yeah.
Or take NAACP versus Claiborne Hardware Co., where a speaker told a crowd that anyone who failed to boycott businesses would be disciplined and said, if we catch any of you going in any of them racist stores, we're going to break your damn neck. The court held that this speech was not incitement. If these incendiary statements with express references to violence do not rise to the level of incitement, then surely Mr. Trump's request to peacefully protest could never be incitement. In Bible Believers, the court held that speech did not amount to incitement to riot under the Brandenburg test, despite the obviously explosive context, because it did not include, quote, a single word that could be perceived as encouraging explicitly or implicitly violence or lawlessness. The same can be said of Mr. Trump's speech in this case. Not a single word encouraged violence or lawlessness explicitly or implicitly, and again, he affirmatively exhorted the crowd to act peacefully when protesting. Moreover, the Bible Believers Court observed that the hostile reaction of a crowd does not transform protected speech into incitement. I remember this case. They haven't really explained it here. But this case, the Bible Believers were, this is a group. I want to say this was a similar instance to Brandenburg where you had a right wing, we'll say, not really conservative, but highly Christian group. And Christian in the way that the KKK was Christian. And they were talking about some very explicit acts that they were going to do with bricks, if I remember right. But I'm not 100% sure on that. Are you familiar with the
Okay.
case?
No, no.
Okay.
I never heard of the Bible Believers case. So
So it
what?
goes on. Oh, did you have something?
No,
Sorry.
no.
It goes on, even though the Bible believer's speech actually triggered a predictably violent reaction, it was their speech that the court scrutinized, and their speech was held to be protected despite its blatantly offensive and even provocative nature and despite the crowd's reactions. It follows that if Mr. Trump's speech is protected because it, like that of the Bible believers, did not include a single word encouraging violence, then the fact that audience members reacted using force does not transform Mr. Trump's protected speech into unprotected speech. The reaction of listeners who may or may not be hostile does not alter the otherwise protected nature of the speech. Nor is, quote, the mere tendency of speech to encourage unlawful acts sufficient reason for banning it. What is required to forfeit constitutional protection is incitement speech that specifically advocates for listeners to take unlawful action. Again, even assuming that then President Trump's words may arguably have had a tendency to encourage unlawful use of force, which they did not, they certainly did not specifically advocate for listeners to take unlawful action and therefore protected. As the Bible Believers Court further observed, quote, it is not an easy task to find that speech rises to such a dangerous level that it can be deemed incitement to riot. The words alleged in the current case, much less offensive than those of the Bible believers, are not up to the high standard demanded by Brandenburg. Because not a single word of the speech actually advocates violence, either implicitly or explicitly, first Brandenburg factor, specific advocacy of violence, is totally absent. The allegations in the article seems to place heavy reliance on the latter two Brandenburg factors, that is, the allegation that Mr. Trump intended violence to occur and knew that his words were likely to result in violence, but this backwards approach was specifically rejected in Hess versus Indiana, where the court reversed a judgment of the Indiana Supreme Court. In Hess, the court noted that the state court had placed primary reliance on evidence that the speaker's statement was intended to incite further lawless action and was likely to produce such action. This was not enough. The Hess court focused on the words, on the language that comprise the subject speech, i.e. the first Brandenburg factor. It hardly needs repeating, the court repeated, that the constitutional guarantees of freedom of speech forbid the states to punish the use of words or language not within narrowly limited classes of speech, and in applying this wisdom, the court likewise tied its conclusion to the words of the subject speech. Quote, and since there was no evidence or rational inference from the import of the language that his words were intended to produce and likely to produce imminent disorder, those words could not be punished by the state on the ground that they had a tendency to lead to violence. In other words, Hess teaches that the speaker's intent to encourage violence, the second factor, and the tendency of his statement to result in violence are not enough to forfeit First Amendment protection unless the words used specifically advocated the use of violence, whether explicitly or implicitly. First factor. That's a lot of explicitly and implicits. In Snyder versus Phelps, court observed, the court is obligated to make an independent examination of the whole record in order to make sure the judgment does not constitute a forbidden intrusion on the field of free expression. In considering content, form, and context, no factor is dispositive, and it is necessary to evaluate all the circumstances of the speech, including what was said, where it was said, and how it was said. And we're talking Phelps here. These are the awful people. This is Fred Phelps. Who are those guys? Do you remember that super crazy, the Westboro Baptist Church? This is Westboro Baptist. The God hates F slurs people.
Oh yeah.
Who were protesting soldiers' funerals. That's who they're talking about here. A reviled group. So yes, in addition to the content and form of the words, the Senate is obliged to consider the context based on the whole record, but not instead of it. Here, of course, the whole record consists of the charges in the article. An article of impeachment is literally a charge of particular wrongdoing. Thus, under the division of responsibility in the Constitution, the Senate must conduct a trial solely on the charge specified in the articles of impeachment, approved by a vote of the House, and presented to the Senate. The Senate cannot expand the scope of a trial to consider mere assertions appearing in biased media reports that the House did not include in the articles of impeachment submitted to a vote of that chamber, nor even in the unsupported statements in the House manager's trial memorandum. Similarly, House managers trying the case in the Senate must be confined to the specific conduct alleged in the articles approved by the House. These restrictions follow both from the plain terms of the Constitution limiting the Senate to trying an impeachment framed by the House and from the elementary principles of due process. Quote, the senator's role is solely one of acting on the accusations, articles of impeachment, voted by the House of Representatives. The Senate cannot lawfully find the president guilty of something not charged by the House, any more than a trial jury can find a defendant guilty of something not charged in the indictment. No principle of procedural due process is more clearly established than the notice of the specific charge and a chance to be heard in a trial of the issues raised by that charge, if desired, are among the constitutional rights of every accused. As the Supreme Court has explained, it has been the rule for over 130 years that a court cannot permit a defendant to be tried on charges that are not made in the indictment against him. Doing so is fatal error. Under the same principles of due process, the Senate must similarly refuse to consider any uncharged allegations as a basis for conviction. This is a long section.
I'm not even sure. What are they? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out what they're getting at here. So they're saying, let's break this down for your readers, because for your listeners,
I was thinking this is getting way too long to just keep going.
Yeah, well, I was trying to help you cover ground, so that's why I was like staying muted for a while, because we do have pages to cover here and an hour and a half left. So that's why I was figuring if you're reading for a while, that's not bad, and then afterwards we'll summarize. And what it seems like they're saying here is it's almost as if the House is trying to bring charges that are not listed in the indictment, and I'm not sure.
I think what they're going for here is Trump is charged with incitement to insurrection, but they're referencing the call to Brad Raffensperger, which isn't incitement to insurrection in any sort of way.
Oh yeah,
They're
yeah, that makes
referencing,
sense.
and they use this today. They had a lot of tweets from December 7th and stuff like that, which are well before the speech on
All of
January
his tweets,
6th.
like almost any tweet before January 6th cannot possibly be part of the charge.
Right. But that's the bulk of their evidence are these. Well, he planned this thing. He prepped his followers to believe that he was the winner, and therefore that incited them to riot when he set off their CIA embedded trigger words on January 6th. Right.
But that was like the powder keg he was packing for months.
Yeah. That's what I think that's what they're going there.
But
I think they're spending a lot of time in this brief on that, and I don't think it's all that important, personally.
Right. Because I don't think that I think people do react and say, look, if he's trying to set up the ability to incite for months, and this is where he's pulling the trigger, this is where he's lighting the fuse. So I think that people will find relevance to, it's not going to be rejected for lack of relevance. That's certainly not going to happen. So you want to make a big stink that, hey, you can't be talking about Raffensperger. Hey, you can't be talking about tweets that he sent down December 18th. Yeah, you're probably accurate, but no one really cares enough that they're going to say, oh, okay, we're not listening now to this part of
I just don't see why this needs 10 pages. I mean, this section.
It's to give us something to do.
Yeah, this section has been really long. It's like, I don't know if this is your strongest argument. It's not a bad argument. It's just not that important. Like, they're really focused on January 6th. Just nail them on the January 6th thing over and over to me. But cut 5 pages. Let everybody go home early. Bad Vibe says, Nick's nose takes up too much screen. We must correct this egregious issue. We must fight to get Nick to use a profile shot and remove his nose from the picture. Fight for nose-free law-splaining. Oh, how dare you.
I think if you had a slightly smaller nose, you would be so much less popular. Like, the nose humor is the fixation on your nose from your audience is like, look, I'm not going to say you have a small nose. Okay. I don't have a small nose either. I actually, after when I was on this show and people were comparing my nose to yours, I was like talking to my wife now. I was like, come on, I don't have, that's not my nose. I mean, so she's like, well, you gotten older, your nose keeps growing. I'm like, great. And it became like a running joke in my house that I'm like Pinocchio. Take
that.
Every week, it's just my nose is getting that much bigger ever since I came on your show. Before that, I always thought like, wow, I have a great nose. Like, that's like,
oh no, now it's contagious. My nose is contagious.
But my thinking is that, yeah, you would have like 30% less audience members if you had a nose that was less prominent. Yeah. So
I think my nose makes me trustworthy. I'm like Jennifer Grey, right? Like in Dirty Dancing, she's super hot and popular, and then she gets her nose job, and no one remembers she exists.
Right. Well, I'll tell you this much.
Like Samson, she took away her power.
The first time I saw you, I thought of Jennifer Grey.
Yeah. There. See.
What? I don't even understand what you're trying to say with Jennifer Grey. Where does that come in? I was making a joke. I don't even know what you're talking about because
Jennifer Grey
she.
from Dirty Dancing. She had the
Yeah, I
she had
know
a
she was baby. No one puts baby in a corner. Yeah,
right.
okay, I get that.
She
But
had a big nose. She got a nose job, and then her career ended after the nose job. They didn't cast her anymore.
that be saying because of the nose job. And yet, if you had a nose
Yeah,
job,
like I said, like Samson. Samson cuts his hair and he gets weak. Jennifer Grey cuts her nose and she gets less work. If I
so bad.
lost,
You're saying,
yeah,
yeah, if you lost the nose, if you got a nose job, bad vibes would be like, I'm out of here.
exactly, exactly. And I wouldn't
Bad
blame him.
vibes. You need to let us know if that's true. Let us
I
know if that's true, because you might not realize it, but these generous contributions you're giving, he's probably saving away for rhinoplasty,
only to make
and
it
then you.
bigger.
That's
I
what
need
you said.
a nose that's larger that requires a truss coming out of my forehead to hold it up. You know, like we need serious nose powers here. Uh,
Beautiful.
In its examination of context, the Snyder court held that because the speech was protected, its setting or context could not render it unprotected. In fact, Mr. Trump's admonition not to harm is analogous to the circumstances considered in Bible believers as neutralizing the inciting tendency of words that were even more offensive in nature and delivered in an even more volatile context. Okay, I've got to find out if I'm right on what Bible believers was. Let's see. Bible believers case versus Wayne County. Let's just see the synopsis. Self-described Christian evangelical group when they removed them from the Arab International Festival in Dearborn. No, I'm thinking of a completely different thing. This is 2015. To protect them
Yeah, I
from a
was talking
hostile.
to my muted camera here for a second there. I was going to offer to Google it for you if you
Oh,
wanted, but
yeah,
you got the Cliff's Notes version in there for you for
yeah.
us.
They were kicked out of a festival after allegedly being assaulted. They basically they spoke out against Muslims. They attended the 2011 festival wearing messages that were overtly anti-Islam and preaching conversion to Christianity. This upset many people at the festival who were of the Muslim faith. On the first day of the festival, the believers were sent to a free speech zone. On the second day, they were told there were no more free speech zone. Then they began walking through the festival, spreading their message. By the way, the absence of a free speech zone means everywhere's a free speech zone if you're on government land. They alleged they were assaulted by several members of the crowd, and then festival organizers kicked them out of the festival instead of the people who perpetrated the violence. They returned to the 2012 festival but demanded better police protection. They again wore very provocative shirts with messages such as Islam is a religion of blood and murder, and only Jesus Christ can turn you from sin and hell. I mean, that's not that crazy. Like I see that on. I've driven through the South. That's on every billboard I've ever seen. So,
Yeah,
like,
and that was the impetus that led to the creation of safe spaces on every college campus in the country.
right.
That because people have to be safe from that type
You have to
of
be safe
terrifying
from their
hate speech.
words causing someone else to unreasonably attack them. Like if someone's walking around that says, there is no way but Allah, I don't feel like I need to harm them. Like, how
Right.
dare you turning me from Jesus? I'll kill you now. Okay, sorry. Even taking every one of Mr. Trump's prior statements about the election in the most negative light, they were at most only abstract discussions that never advocated for physical force. And even if they had broached the idea of violence, the mere abstract teaching of the moral propriety is, or more even moral necessity for a for a resort to force and violence is not the same as preparing a group for violent action and steeling it to such action. Indeed, there had never been violence before, and so there was thus no reason to expect that Mr. Trump's statements would lead to any injury to the officers or protesters. Moreover, even assuming arguendo, if one could posit that the likely response to that statement would have been imminent lawless action, Mr. Trump corrected any such misunderstandings by immediately saying, "Stay peaceful." The fact that some small percentage of unlawful rioters who, as the FBI already knew in advance, had been planning to come in and wage war, did so later that same day does not in any way mean they were acting at Mr. Trump's direction or through any incitement from Mr. Trump. In the context of ordinary civil litigation, such a bald allegation of agency is by itself a mere legal conclusion and is therefore insufficient to withstand a motion to dismiss. A complaint relying on agency must plead facts which, if proved, could establish the existence of an agency relationship. It is insufficient to merely plead the legal conclusion of agency. weird argument here. Neither a single incident nor sporadic incidents are sufficient to establish foreseeability. And we got one more paragraph for this section. For First Amendment purposes, the meaning of words must be judged objectively. Unprotected speech is the exception to the rule of free speech, so it cannot be punished on the ground that it might be unprotected. The speech must objectively fall within the narrow exception for unprotected speech, lest protected speech be penalized based on a subjective or idiosyncratic interpretation. Courts weigh the circumstances in order to protect, not to destroy, freedom of speech. If the freedoms of expression are to have the breathing space they need to survive, courts must err on the side of protecting political speech. Here, the question is not even close. Mr. Trump's words are core speech protected under the First Amendment.
Yeah, I just want to. This whole agency thing is very confusing. I don't know where it is that there's a claim of agency that's happening here that they seem to be trying to knock off and say, well, you can't make a claim of agency.
Yeah, because
Even
incitement is necessarily non-agent. Like, because if you have an agent, you're not inciting them. They're acting as you. They're acting with your authority. So there isn't an incitement. Like,
well, that's never made clear. Look, I'm a lawyer,
yeah,
okay, and most of these senators are lawyers, and I'm sitting here, I'm like, I don't even understand why they're arguing. To me, this page here is something that seems totally extraneous, and it makes this is Castor sort of rambling in a direction that I don't know what he's talking about here. And I'm
I
looking at this paragraph like 4 times, and I'm like, I don't know what agency has to do with anything that we're talking about here.
I wonder if they
So,
briefed agency in like 3 or 4 paragraphs and then scrapped it, but forgot a paragraph.
right, and that sometimes happens if, especially like rush job. That's what I'm saying. Is I think this page is confusing, as it's confusing as hell, and I think that with your explanation makes a lot of sense. That they probably just sometimes you're sort of cutting from here and pasting from here. Maybe later on in the last 18 pages is going to be a whole explanation as to how agency is relevant to the issue of incitement. But just throwing out this paragraph here in the middle of nowhere just seems kind of confusion. It seems
Yeah.
confusing to me.
And again, if the charge is incitement, then agency doesn't exist. You can't incite your own agent.
Right.
That's the
Okay. Now that you say that, it makes sense, but that's not written anywhere here.
No, I know. Yeah, that I'm saying that it's a pointless argument to include at all because there's no. I haven't even seen the House managers say that these guys are agents of Trump. I mean, they're acting on his behalf. They're acting at his instruction and direction, but not with his authority. Like they're
I mean,
not,
I guess because
maybe they made it in their brief somewhere.
well, in the paragraph starts with them talking about how the FBI knew something was going to happen. So that to me is an argument which is saying there can't be incitement when if it's a coordinated conspiracy. Incitement and conspiracy are two totally different things. And maybe they're saying that if it's conspiracy, now you're acting as a conspirator or as an agent of mine in this conspiracy. So, if it's something that's pre-planned, that is almost the opposite of incitement. Incitement is
Yeah,
we're all caught up in the rush of the moment. It's like a lack of premeditation is incitement. They're almost
maybe
playing on the emotion of the crowd rather than having this coordinated, thought out insurrection. So
I'm wondering if and this could be the other thing. Maybe there's a throwaway line about agency in the trial brief of the House managers, and so they felt they had to dedicate a couple words to it.
could be.
That's the other possibility. But I think
I like that you're giving them the benefit of the doubt there.
yeah.
That's
I mean, I think it's either that or I think that there was just an editing error and they're like, we briefed this, we don't really like it. Let's kind of take it out. And then they missed a spot.
yeah.
uh,
Definitely could be.
okay. And I was hoping you would pick up on the agency thing. Cause I was like, I don't know why this is here. Okay. We've got 12 pages. We can do this.
Yeah, we're doing great.
Lastly, Mr. Trump's figurative use of the words fighting have been used by many. None are impeachable. And this is a good section. I've read this section thoroughly before. This is where they're going to throw Democrat words in their face. And that's always fun. It is truly incredible that House Democratic leadership is feigning horror at the president's choice of words, considering some of their own members' recent public comments. For example, in 2018, Speaker Nancy Pelosi held her weekly press conference in the Capitol Visitor Center. In reference to a policy she disagreed with, the most powerful Democrat in the country said, "I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country. Maybe there will be." Was she advocating violence? Sending a silent dog whistle to radical protesters? should she be held accountable for her extremist rhetoric and removed from office? As political violence grew last summer, Representative Ayanna Presley went on national TV and said that, quote, there needs to be unrest in the streets, end quote. Should we hold her liable to pay for all of the businesses that were destroyed when people heeded her call and removed from office? In perhaps the most egregious call for physical confrontation, Rep. Maxine Waters told a crowd at a rally that they should accost members of the government that they don't like. Quote, you think we're rallying now? You ain't seen nothing yet. Already you have members of your cabinet that are being booed out of restaurants. Protesters taking up at their house saying, no peace, no sleep. If you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd and you push back on them and you tell them they're not welcome anymore anywhere. We want history to record that we stood up, that we pushed back, that we fought. In another cable interview, Waters was even more specific. Quote, I have no sympathy for these people that are in this administration. They won't be able to go to a restaurant. They won't be able to stop at a gas station. They're not going to be able to shop at a department store. The people are going to turn on them. They're going to protest. They're absolutely going to harass them. We've got to push back. In that instance, even Speaker Pelosi called Representative Waters' remarks unacceptable, but of course did nothing to remove her from office. Just like she's done nothing to censure other members who have tweeted specific calls for tweeted calls for genocide. And this is 193. Rashida Tlaib retweeted a tweet that had a saying that apparently is a direct reference to the genocide of Israelis in Gaza. Are you
The
familiar?
Jews.
Yeah.
Yeah. From the river to the sea. This is something that was said, I think, a century ago, long before the formation of the state of Israel, when there was talk about the potential of the state of Israel. That I think one of the main leaders of Islam basically made a comment that if such an effort were ever made, that there would be blood from the river to the sea.
Right.
And it was talking about basically they'll kill every Jew if that's what's gonna happen. And Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar are both rabid, frothing anti-Semites.
Yeah. To put it lightly, like honestly,
And,
their speech might make a Proud Boy blush.
yeah, Proud Boys. There are plenty of black people who are
Yeah,
Proud
I'm
Boys. I mean,
joking.
right?
I've met like some of the Proud Boys. The ones I met were not particularly racist in any way, and of course, the head of the Proud Boy is a Cuban.
Yeah.
He's arrested right now. He's also a Fed. That was great. That was interesting.
Oh, is he
He was a Fed informant up until like 2015 or something like that.
really?
Um, but yeah, I was just running with the joke. I don't really care about the
I'm
Proud.
sorry.
I think the Proud Boys are just like relatively irrelevant. I mean,
Hmm.
personally, they've been made into a demon.
Well, especially ever since he said "stand by, stand down," and that it's like almost like, wait, that's the first time I ever heard of them. Was when he said proud that night during that debate when he said Proud Boys stand by stand by. I didn't know what he was saying. I didn't know there was a group called Proud Boys. I thought he was just talking to patriots in general or MAGA
When
people.
they
And
told him to say Proud Boys. That's who they, because
right,
they're like,
Biden baited him with it. He
right.
like said like, what are you going to say to the Proud Boys?
And he's like, who do you want me to condemn? I'll Trump was hilarious. Who do you want me to condemn? I'll condemn anybody. I condemn tons of people. Anybody you want.
Right.
And then they're like, Proud Boys. Okay, Proud Boys, stand back, stand down, or stand by, stand down, or whatever it was.
Which is like not condemnation at all.
Right. But it was, he should not have fallen for the trap anyway, because his first answer was good. Will you condemn
Yeah,
white supremacy? He says, sure.
I have like 1,000 times.
Yeah.
Like if I had a nickel for every time he condemned white supremacy, I wouldn't be doing this with you right now. So
Yeah. He should have just, sure. Will you condemn white supremacy? I just did. Sure. Yes, I condemn it. Will you condemn these
yeah.
people? Whatever. Like, just,
Yeah, I just did.
I
Who?
just
Well, tell
did.
me who. Give a name. Yeah.
Yeah, he fell for that, and this is why you don't ever apologize to these people. This is why you don't give in, and like the condemnation game it's a trap, because you're never condemning enough. You're never condemning the right people. You're never condemning this. And then if you condemn them and they don't accept the condemnation, well, then it's your fault too. It's like,
They actually had, I think it was Jake Tapper who like I don't know, 5 months ago made a comment, or during the debate season, he basically was like, still to this day, He has never once in his life ever condemned white supremacy. And then and I saw this, like, and then there's a clip from Jake Tapper with Trump in 2017 or 2016 saying, "Will you condemn white supremacy?" He says, "Sure, I condemn white supremacy." And 4 years later, Jake Tapper is like, to this day, he's never once. He did it to you, to your face.
On
It's
your
almost like,
show.
yes, it's like Tuesday. It's like Tuesday he condemns white supremacy. Wednesday they're like, "Will you finally condemn white supremacy?" He's like, "Yeah, I condemn white supremacy." And then Thursday they're like, "Look, we keep asking you to condemn it. Why can't you just condemn it already?" He's like, "I condemn white supremacy. What do you want? What do you want? I condemned it 1,000 times." No, you've never ever said it. Friday they come back and and CNN's big headline is, "Is today the day that Trump will condemn white supremacy?"
Look,
Like,
I don't even
what?
like white people. I prefer orange. Orange is a much better color. Bronze, even little bold, terrific. White, little bland, little bland. I'm gonna say. It's all right.
You really have that nailed down. I've tried doing it and I can't. I just can't. It doesn't sound right. When I
Uh,
hear it back, I'm like, that was terrible. So
uh, in that instance, oh wait. Okay, so here we go. The genocide. Because when it is her side of the aisle making their political speech heard, Speaker Pelosi is nothing if not tolerant. Other Democratic leadership went so far as to defend Representative Waters by bending over backwards to read an inverted message of peacefulness into her violent statements, the exact opposite of what they did to former President Trump. Giving her far more than the benefit of the doubt, Representative Cedric Richmond claimed that in exercising her constitutional right to freedom of speech at a recent rally, Congresswoman Waters did not, as she has made clear, encourage violence. She instead encouraged Americans to exercise their constitutional right to freedom of speech and peacefully assemble. For those who would say that those quotes must be understood in their greater context, i.e., that they were clearly meant to be political speech, we say exactly. The truth is that both the Mr. Trump speech and these comments are acceptable political free speech. It is a double standard at play here that is entirely unacceptable, and Mr. Trump asks that the Senate reject it in no uncertain terms.
what they need to do, seriously, what they really, really need to do. You had the left put up their movie montage. They seriously need to wheel out this 40 screen foot TV and have Maxine Waters on, up there railing away, and then get this guy on TV right afterwards. What's his name? Richland or whatever his name?
Uh,
Cedric Richmond.
Cedric, yeah.
Yeah. And then show a clip of him defending her and then just repeating his words. We say to you now here today that he was not encouraging violence, that he was just encouraging people to exercise their speech. What he said was much less than what she said. Much, much less direct.
You know, it'd be even
Much further away from incitement under the law.
You know, it'd be even funnier. So they get Cedric Richmond's speech, right? They get the recording of it, and it says, and it should go like this: in exercising her constitutional right to freedom of speech at a recent rally, President Trump did not, as she has made clear, encourage violence.
I love it.
President Trump instead encouraged Americans to exercise their constitutional rights. That's how it should go. That would be great.
And let them say, objection, that's not what he actually said. Hello, that's not what he said. It'll be like the whole Dante Carpum like meme with it's like, wait, there really weren't two babies like trying to kill each other. We never posted that anywhere.
Right.
And let them like put them back on their heels. That would be like that's a great meme.
He's so funny, just President
and it'd be
Trump.
really funny if the voice sounds nothing like his voice. It'll be like a completely like a terrible, like me doing Trump type of voice, but that person doing Senator Richmond. Where it's like he's like that would be so awesome. It's like in exercising her constitutional rights to freedom of speech at a recent rally, and then like completely different.
President Trump.
Yeah, with that like Cuban accent.
Yeah. No, what they should do is they should cut in like Nancy Pelosi saying President Trump, right? Like just grab that.
You're saying like clip it that way.
Clip
like
one
her just saying the words President Trump.
Or Jamie Raskin even. Just anybody. It would be great. Okay, this is
You know
not.
that, and that's what they do in all these clips. Whenever you see a clip of him saying "fight," they literally will have a montage where they take the 4 seconds that he's using the word "fight," and they'll just have one after another, after another, after another. So it seems as if the entire time he's basically saying "fight, fight, fight," and then the crowd screaming, "We'll fight for you, we'll fight for you," as if like he is this messianic image that they're making him out to be, and that he's exhorting him to do it. And this whole montage that they put together, it actually there was a Super Bowl ad. I'm planning on making a video about this, but you're going to need to see the video to really appreciate its fullness anyway. So I'm not ruining anything for the audience.
Okay.
But there's a Super Bowl ad with Tom Brady and Gronk and T-Mobile. Where did you see this ad during the Super Bowl?
No, I
It,
didn't even realize the Super Bowl was happening. I forgot.
right, right. Well, it was pretty recently, and it's a game that like a few people watch.
Yeah.
And right. So in the Super Bowl ad, there's you had they said like 1 year ago, and Tom Brady's on a voice connection with Gronk, and he's like, "What do you think, Gronk? Should I retire?" And Gronk is standing like on a beach in Florida. He's like, "Man, you have to do it. The sand here is so. Retirement is amazing. The sand here is so soft, and you're gonna have a great time. You and I, we're gonna hook up. We're gonna get parties all the time. You've done your time. Just move on. You're gonna love it. It's gonna be great. You and I are gonna have a great time together." And then they sort of show what Brady heard, and like and then you hear like because he had bad reception, it keeps glitching the phone. So like to Brady, like it was showing as Gronk saying, "Man, you're gonna retire. People are gonna say you're soft. You need to come down here and play in Tampa. I'll even come and join you, and we're gonna win another one." And basically that he got
Yeah.
the exact opposite message because of the glitching. And it reminded me of these montages that they do. They basically like, take this bit here, that bit there, that bit there, and all of a sudden it's like a whole different message from what actually was being said. And they say, well, let's put in context how many times he said fight, and they're actually giving a completely false context as to exactly what was being said that night or that
Right.
that afternoon. So I
Yeah.
thought the
Or
commercial
they're.
was really apt. And considering that was Brady, who's a big Trump fan, who was doing it, I think it's pretty funny that T-Mobile got suckered into having him make that commercial.
I liked
But
when they were playing a clip of Trump, and then the violent clip that they were playing right next to it was like 3 hours different in time. It's like, how are these two things? They're not related. They're different.
yeah.
Um. Okay. Let's see. Let's get back here. This is not the first time Congress has impeached and tried to convict a president for making a speech. The last time did not work either. The 10th article of impeachment against Andrew Johnson read as follows. That said, Andrew Johnson, President of the United States, unmindful of the high duties of his office and the dignity and proprieties thereof, and of the harmony and courtesies which ought to exist and be maintained between the executive and legislative branches of the government of the United States, designing and intending to set aside the rightful authority and powers of Congress, did attempt to bring into disgrace, ridicule, hatred, contempt, and reproach the Congress of the United States and the several branches thereof, to impair and destroy the regard and respect of all the good people of the United States for the Congress and legislative power thereof, which all officers of the government ought inviolably to preserve and maintain, and to excite the odium and resentment of all the good people of the United States against Congress and the laws by it duly and constitutionally enacted, and in pursuance of his said design and intent openly and publicly, and before divers assemblages of the citizens of the United States, convened in divers parts thereof, to meet and receive said Andrew Johnson as the Chief Magistrate of the United States, did make and deliver with a loud voice certain intemperate, inflammatory, and scandalous harangues, and did therein utter loud threats and bitter menaces, as well against Congress as the laws of the United States duly enacted thereby, amid the cries, jeers, and laughter of the multitudes, which said utterances, declarations, threats, and harangues highly censurable in any are peculiarly indecent and unbecoming in the Chief Magistrate of the United States. Wow. You gotta love
And
articles of impeachment from the 1860s.
it's like they couldn't ellipsis any of this. They really had to dedicate what was that, like 400 words?
There's quite a few. I don't think it's 400. I think it's about 200. It's about
Okay.
200 words. It's a
It's about
lot.
150. It's 150 too many.
Yeah. Yeah. It should barely be its own indented quote, right? Like
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
50
yeah.
words.
Exactly. Yeah,
It should
that is
barely
50,
be
right?
there. Yeah. And they
I thought
they
it's three.
dropped
I thought it's 3 lines. I thought 3 lines is four. Once you get to 4 lines, it's supposed to be indented. Three
ours is
lines, up to 3 lines.
our writing guide was 50 words. So,
It's pretty close to the same amount
it's about
anyway.
the same, yeah. Unless you have like a lot of really short words. But yeah, this is a really weird one. I mean, it's not really weird. The translation to 2020 is he made fun of Congress. Like he literally just mocked Congress in front of a crowd and the crowd laughed at Congress. That's what they impeached him for here.
Yeah, well, he was not very popular in general anyway. So.
No. No. While no vote was ever taken on the 10th article, multiple senators expressed their concern about trying to impeach for inflammatory rhetoric. James Patterson noted that in view of the liberty of speech, which our laws authorize, in view of the culpable license of speech, which is practiced and allowed in other branches of the government, I doubt if we can at present make low and scurrilous speeches a ground of impeachment. Senator Sherman echoed this view while indicating his support for conviction on a number of the other articles. He voiced concerns about the 10th article, arguing that we must guard against making crimes out of mere political differences or the abuse of the freedom of speech. So there's that.
And that's actually a pretty powerful point. It's a subtly powerful point that even the guy who's convicting him says
Right.
that this is not a basis to convict, and this is the only thing you have to try to convict him on. So
Mm-hmm. I do love. I legit. Do you know how long it would take Congress now? Think about that. That's their 10th article of impeachment. There are
yeah,
9 before that. You know how long it would take them to construct that paragraph of words as an article of impeachment and like vote on it and approve it? First of all,
I
half of Congress doesn't have a
wouldn't understand that.
vocabulary that
Right? They wouldn't understand it.
they'd be like, I didn't, I
I don't know what odium means. Yeah.
look, I was a hospitality major. I have no idea what any of this is. Uh, could you imagine? God,
We didn't
I,
cover this in gender studies.
I miss it. I miss that sort of writing, that like high English writing from government. I mean, because now it's just so boring.
Do you want all the S's to be written with F's, like the staff F, like when they is that what it
Yes.
was? The S's became that's what you want? Was it Congress
Yeah,
that has decided?
I want it's like them it's like they all have a lisp and that's how I picture them anyway. Congress does not approve. uh Bad Vibe says the irony of Trump's impeachment is that it shows us history of politics and vitriol in it. Yeah, I mean, politics again to say that Trump is a particularly egregious offender as a president is to ignore the history of presidents. I mean,
Yeah.
they're people. They tend to be alphas. They tend to be brazen. Like that's how you
Hmm.
become president in the first place. The only difference is now we have the internet. It's literally the sole difference. And we have to all remember that our founding fathers got so mad over a tax that they decided to kill a country right out of right out of ours.
Yeah.
They're like, no, we got to fight these guys with guns. Like, whoa, damn, settle down, Hamilton. Like this is a bit much. All right,
You know, back in those days, I mean, they were real men. I mean, Hamilton like dies in a duel. I mean, that's
not
who.
yeah, and his buddy almost killed another guy in a duel where he was the second. Like it's not like and his son died in a duel.
Yeah.
Like,
And by the way, did you know that Aaron Burr, who killed Hamilton, that he had an affair with the same Mrs. Reynolds that Hamilton did?
oh,
Did
I
you know
didn't
that?
I didn't know he was banging Reynolds also.
I think after. I'm not even sure it was. I'm not sure it was after, but I actually this is more of my. I get like my base historic facts from the Bathroom Reader Institute.
Yeah.
If you never checked it out, their work is really remarkable. So
Okay. I'll look it up.
it's basically books that are meant to like give you like useless information, and they have different sized articles that you basically supposed to leave in the bathroom for like when you're bored.
Sure. The other thing, I think Thomas Jefferson killed a man on the White House lawn in a duel as well. Like this is how they did stuff.
Yeah,
It's
they they were gangsta.
Andrew Jackson brought a literal stick to beat congressmen who didn't agree with him, and he beat one of them almost to death. And his constituents sent him replacement sticks.
Yeah, and Davy Crockett was the same thing. Davy Crockett was the same way. He was what? He was a congressman or a senator. I don't remember, but he definitely
I
held
think he was
political office.
I think he was a congressman.
And I
First,
think Jim Bowie also was, right?
yeah, they were. Crockett fled the United States for Texas, and then Texas was, of course, brought into the United States, and then I think
Right.
that's when he became a congressman after that.
No,
Or no,
they both
yeah, they
died
both
in the
died at the
Alamo.
Alamo. So no,
Yeah,
he must have been
yeah.
a congressman before and then left, probably due to death.
Do, do you know the Bowie knife that we have from Jim Bowie? The reason that he was so into knives is because he got into so many fights with people. He was like actually a real man's man, they say, and
Oh,
that
Bowie
he
was a monster. He was my
yeah, that he
hero
was
as a
like he
kid.
was built like a Hulk. He was built like a Hulk, and that basically, if you stepped on him the wrong way, he would literally try to kill you. And apparently, someone who he was always fighting with tried killing him like twice with a gun, and the gun and like held a gun at him, and it misfired, and like he ended up like basically killing the guy with his bare hands.
I
And after that, he swore off guns because he's like, knives don't misfire. That's his perspective. A knife doesn't misfire.
I took my family to the Alamo because I'm from Texas originally.
Okay.
And so I grew up learning about the Alamo and Texas history. Then I moved to Minnesota, which has no interesting history that they're not willing to. They actually do. They're not willing to teach it to you in schools. You don't learn a Minnesota history class. It's really weird.
I didn't even know. I didn't know Minnesota had any history at all.
We are the site of the largest mass execution in United States history.
Really?
The Sioux Uprising, presided over by Abraham Lincoln.
Really?
He pardoned all of the Confederate generals, but he killed all the Indians.
Wow. How many Indians did he kill?
I think it was like 12 or something, all hung at the same time. It was pretty
Wow.
big. That was like
Yeah.
like just miles from my house.
I guarantee you this: if you ask anyone which president presided over the largest mass execution in American history, no one. I mean,
They're not going to say Lincoln.
35 names. They'll guess 35 names before they get to Lincoln.
Yeah. It's crazy. But no, so I took my family to the Alamo a couple years back. We were down in Texas. We were driving through San Antonio. We decided to stop on our way back to Minnesota, and I was like, "Let's stop. Let's go to the Alamo. I haven't been there in so many years. The kids will like it." They didn't. It's like 105 degrees. They didn't give a shit about the Alamo.
Right.
But I love it. And they had the Jim Bowie exhibit. Right? They had converted one of the buildings, and it was all about him. Like, his life story was written on the walls. It was so cool. And they talked
He was
about...
also like, he was married to like, he supposedly had like the most beautiful woman in the world as his wife.
As
Like, I
the
think she might have been
biggest, chattest dude must, right? Like,
Yes.
this
Yeah.
is a hulking monster the Bowie knife exists because swords are unwieldy. They're too big, and you can't get them out in a brawl. But, that's... So you have to have this, like, like this 7-inch knife. That was the size. Like, it's this size because too small to have like a little pocket or a boot knife or something. That might not kill a man. You have to get it all the way under the rib cage and into the heart. So you got to have a long enough knife to do that. But it can't be a sword because if you get in a bar fight or whatever, you can't be drawing out this like 18-inch saber and slashing at people. This is Texas. We're not in New England. You gotta...
Right.
And so he had this big
And he
ass
actually
knife.
died of disease because no man could have killed him. Only God could have killed him.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
yeah.
And in his death, he's actually Buddhist and was reincarnated as Chuck Norris. I mean, that's what happened. I got to find a Jim Bowie expert and just interview him on the show and just ask him questions about my superhero. He was also...
I didn't know he was your superhero. I just started talking about him, and I stumbled into like the secret longing life of Nick Ricketta.
I wanted a Bowie knife my entire childhood, and I saved up $110 and went to the Alamo with my grandparents, and I bought like a little 4-inch Bowie knife. I still have it somewhere around, but they don't sell them anymore at the Alamo. They used to sell knives. They don't sell any now. Really a shame. Last time I went there, I was like, oh, I'm an adult now. I'm rich. I'm buying the biggest damn Bowie knife they sell. And they don't sell any. I was pissed.
Wow. What
But
what a missed opportunity. Like, why wouldn't they? That's so dumb.
yeah, I know. Well, because, sensibilities or whatever. Okay, back to this thing.
Let's get back to work. Yeah.
The House afforded President Trump no due process of law. On January 12th, Speaker Pelosi announced the 9 representatives who would serve as the impeachment managers. January 13th, mere days after the press conference purportedly launching the inquiry, House Democrats completed the fastest presidential impeachment inquiry in history and adopted the article of impeachment over strong opposition and with zero due process of law afforded to the president against constitutional requirements and centuries of practice. The lack of due process is no small matter. Due process of law is not a formality. It is a key constitutional right, and when it is lacking, a case is tainted and the case should be dismissed. In the civil context, the law is clear that a case should be dismissed if the government wrongfully interfered with the defendant's due process rights, and that at the core of procedural due process jurisprudence is the right to advance notice of significant deprivations of liberty or property and to a meaningful opportunity to be heard. As it relates to impeachment proceedings, the legal analog is clear. Quote, the gravity of the deprivation at stake is in an impeachment, especially a presidential impeachment, buttresses the conclusion that some due process limitations must apply. It would be incompatible with the framers' understanding of the delicacy and magnitude of trust which so deeply concerns the political reputation and existence of every man engaged in the administration of public affairs to think that they envisioned a system in which the House was free to devise any arbitrary or unfair mechanism it wished for impeaching individuals. The Supreme Court has described due process as the protection of the individual against arbitrary action. There is no reason to think that protection was not intended to extend to impeachments. And in terms of longstanding historical practice, when it comes to those proceedings, precedent is also unambiguous. Although constitutional requirements governing House impeachment proceedings may have been unsettled when the Constitution was adopted, by the 1870s, consistent practice in the House, unbroken since then, gave meaning to the Constitution and settled the minimum procedures that must be afforded for a fair impeachment inquiry. The framers who debated impeachment with reference to the contemporaneous English impeachment of Warren Hastings knew that, quote, the House of Commons did hear the accused and did permit him to produce testimony before they voted an impeachment against him. And practice in the United States rapidly established that the accused in impeachment must be allowed fair process. Although a few early impeachment investigations were ex parte, the House provided the accused with notice and an opportunity to be heard in the majority of cases starting as early as 1818. Democratic members of the House have argued that then President Trump's alleged offense was so grave and his power so immense that there was no time to wait for the actual facts to come to light. In a crocodile tear-stained letter, oh, that's good, Representative Ilhan Omar herself, no stranger to extremist rhetoric, oh, they have a footnote. What does it say?
Yeah, that's a good one to check.
It's a pretty recent one. It's from February 3rd. And it's probably just a link to some nasty stuff that Ilhan Omar has said.
If they're relating it to Marjorie Taylor, I guess they're saying that compared to Marjorie Taylor, Ilhan Omar is pretty evil.
Let's see, copy link. Let me see real quick if there's any really juicy quotes that'll get me kicked off of YouTube. Let's see. Omar's tweet triggered backlash. What was the... Let's see. Babin claims several instances as evidence for Omar's removal from the House of Foreign Affairs Committee, including her February 29 tweet, "It's all about the Benjamins, baby," responding to a comment made by House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy about punishing Omar for being critical of Israel. So anti-Semitic stereotypes. Okay. They don't have just her tweets in a list. I was hoping that's what they would have. They should have just put them in line. Put them in the text.
Yeah, we would have spent an extra page on that. We'd happily be fine with that.
I would have taken that over the agency argument.
Yeah. You think?
Okay, so herself, no stranger to extremist rhetoric, exhorted her colleagues by saying, "The urgency of this moment is real, and we have to be courageous and unified in defense of our republic. Every single hour that Donald Trump remains in office, our country, our democracy, and our national security remain in danger. Congress must take immediate action to keep the people of this country safe and set a precedent that such behavior cannot be tolerated. Of course, President Trump's term came to an end without the apocalyptic predictions of the all-seeing Rep. Omar coming to pass. As Speaker Pelosi told,
All seeing. That's really good.
yeah,
All right.
they just they went ahead and nailed how stupid that all of this doomsaying was.
Yeah.
And again, that's what I like when they're talking about how powerful Trump is. It's like, I mean, he's super powerful, but he can't stop the election. He's super powerful, but he can't stop this impeachment. He's super powerful, but he left office. You know, that's almost like
Yeah.
it's like
It's
all
the
of that
same
power
genius
didn't.
idiot thing. It's the same
Yeah,
genius idiot thing. Yeah.
right,
And at the end of the day, he's just a man. That's really what it is. He's a man who understands. He understands enough about people to understand how things work. That's really what his specialty always was. He understands what makes people. He could incite a rally. He could, if he wanted to, he would be pretty effective at inciting it because he knows, he understands the mindset of people, what appeals to people, to the masses. I mean, you see that from his The Apprentice, and definitely his populist message. Like you said, that was a novel thing for the Red Party to ever bring forward.
right.
So
Well, and
you
just
know,
the fact that he was able to. I mean, prior to running for office, he was one of the most liked figures in the country. Like,
yeah,
he had to become a Republican for half the country to hate him.
yeah, he understands public opinion. He really does,
Very
and he
well.
plays it really well. Yeah.
Bad Vibe says, yes, I enjoy giving Nick crap for his nose. It is humorous and it shows Nick has thick skin, unlike a certain 2-ton symphony singer and voice actors. Nick made lots of money from his nose. His nose grifts better than Ron Popeil. Yes, my nose is selling all sorts of rotisseries. Bad Vibe says, real facts. The Native American Wars ended in 1929. Emancipation was 1880s. Food for thought. And Nick, you missed my super chat about your noses. Second nose chat reply to Joe. Yes, I saw this one, so I read the other one first and went back to it. And Sean McDonald says, wanted to send a bottle of rye for all the joy and entertainment you provided me. Apparently, it's a big no-no to send liquor to P.O. boxes, so here's a down payment for your next bottle. Oh, thank you, buddy. Much appreciated.
It was nice.
Okay, back to this. As Speaker Pelosi told the country she had to act now. So urgent was the matter. So urgent, of course, that instead of immediately sending it over to the Senate so that the president could have a trial and, if convicted, be removed, the speaker once again decided to act in a purely political manner, pretending that she was rushing the impeachment to protect the country from an imminent danger, and then waiting until the president was no longer in the White House to prefer the charge. Prefer? I think they mean proffer.
I think they mean proper.
Yeah, I think so too. That seems like a typo.
Yeah.
The House actually took longer to you could tell they were rushing this. Look at this. This document has been really well drafted, largely devoid of errors. And right here, getting to the end of the document, they've got prefer instead of proffer. They have a T space O. They're hustling, and their proofreading is starting, like their eyes are glazing over.
It's breaking down. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're probably only catching it because this is a third separate day that we're reading these.
Yeah, if we did this in one sitting, there's no chance.
The House actually took longer to transmit the article of impeachment to the Senate than it did to investigate the debate in the first place. Investigate and debate it in the first place. Of course, this is not the first time that Speaker Pelosi has ignored the constitutional protections in an impeachment proceeding. When they led the impeachment of then President Trump the first time, the Democratic leadership also denied him due process, although not as brazenly and outrageously as this time, and the Speaker also refused to send the articles of impeachment to the Senate right away. That time, her machinations were focused on trying to influence the rules that the Senate would put in place for the trial, and she only sent the articles to the Senate when it became clear that she would not get her way. But just like this time, in withholding the articles, the Speaker undercut one of her party's primary arguments for impeachment in the first place, the need for urgency in removing Trump. As Democratic Senator and staunch Pelosi ally Dianne Feinstein put it, the longer it goes on, the less urgent it becomes. So if it's serious and urgent, send them over. If it isn't, don't send it over. This time, the Speaker apparently held the articles over so that she could effectively maneuver an ally in the Senate into the judge's chair. Once the 45th president's term expired and the House chose to allow jurisdiction to lapse on the article of impeachment, the constitutional mandate for the Chief Justice to preside at all impeachments involving the president disappears. Now, instead of the Chief Justice, the trial will be overseen by a bias and partisan senator who will purportedly also act as a juror while ruling on issues that arise during trial. And I think they should still brief this as improper. Like, they're almost conceding the propriety of this move.
The legality of it.
Yeah, like that. Well, once he's out of office, then the Chief Justice doesn't have to sit. I don't think they should concede that point.
Oh, I th they. Oh, I thought you were talking about the ability for Leahy to play judge and jury.
I mean, I think that is a problem, but I also don't think they should readily concede that Roberts shouldn't sit like they seem to do here.
I I agree with you. I would not just yield I would not yield that ground to them because I don't believe in yielding ground in general, and there's no reason to. Um, at the same time, and they do yield it. They could have worded this somewhat differently. The way they could have worded it is like in an effort to try and justify a basis to have a partisan judge, um, even though it's improper for them to have him up there, and still Justice Roberts must be here for this to be for this to be an appropriate impeachment of a president. Um, yeah, but I also don't. I think that's an interesting question as far as playing judge and jury. Like, why should he be able to do that? The only way he should be able to do that is the standard role that the president of the Senate plays judge and jury is as a tiebreaker. So if Leahy is a tiebreaker, that would be a basis for him in theory
Leahy shouldn't
to.
even be Kamala Harris should be there.
Yeah, I don't know why they didn't have her do it.
It doesn't make any sense. I mean, it's not like she's going to be less partial than Pat Leahy. It's like he's not an ally of Trump. So I don't see she would be a non-voting party unless it was a tiebreaker, whereas Pat Leahy will be a voting party no matter what.
And I think they should argue he should not get a vote at all unless he's a tiebreaker.
Right. But
like
he
like between 2/3 and 1/3. Like if it goes 66-33, then he would be able to vote.
yeah. Yeah, I
But
agree.
that and I would think that they should raise that point. And of course, obviously, that will pass in the Senate, and everyone will agree with them on
Yeah.
that.
Right.
Just see if you're paying attention.
That's why I don't think they should have conceded in their brief because I don't know how you preserve an issue like this for appeal to the Supreme Court should the circumstance come up that Trump is ultimately convicted, which is unlikely. But it seems like here, if Trump is ultimately convicted and he were to go in and say this is unconstitutional, the Supreme Court Chief Justice should have presided, and they go look at the trial briefs and they say, your guys didn't seem to think so.
Yeah,
Like,
they didn't preserve for appeal the ability to. Um, yeah, you always want to preserve the record by at least having it in writing there that you made that claim. I guess in theory, their arguments are part of the record. I mean, just because they wrote it over here, they already
yeah,
have made the argument on the first day that hey, Justice Roberts isn't here. So I
right.
think that probably would be enough to preserve for them, and we'll see what they do over their 2 days of rebuttal to the House impeachment managers. But yeah, I agree with you. There's no reason it shouldn't be here, that they should give this ground on paper the way it definitely could be read the way you're reading it.
Yeah. The Senate, in reviewing the House action, should immediately dismiss this case because the process was completely unfair and one sided. The civil analog is clear. Every federal appellate court has a special obligation to satisfy itself not only of its own jurisdiction, but also that of the lower courts in a cause under review, even though the parties are prepared to concede it. Throughout this entire process, Speaker Pelosi was never acting to apply her understanding of the laws of impeachment in any principled manner. Speaker did not think it was necessary to call for an impeachment so long as she got her way, and twice told the vice president and the country just that. She did not really believe that the process was urgent, and it was never actually about whether Donald Trump would stay in office, because once she brought the impeachment article to a vote, she decided to hold it until after he had finished the remainder of his term. If the speaker really believed that the president was that much of a danger, then she was criminally negligent by holding back. Obviously, as demonstrated by her actions, there's only ever one urgency: to score political points quickly before the harried members of even her own party could calm down and look at the facts. And there was only ever one motivation: to try and spin this incredibly sad moment in American history and to use it to embarrass the president. Unfortunately for House Democrats, the impeachment of a former United States president, a private citizen, is unconstitutional. The article is structurally deficient and can only result in acquittal. The hastily drafted article is not only wrong on the facts and the law, it also suffers from a constitutionally fatal structural defect that the Senate cannot remedy. This defect alone makes it worthy of dismissal. Put simply, the articles are impermissibly duplicitous. That is, each article charges multiple different acts as possible grounds for sustaining a conviction. The problem with an article offering such a menu of options is that the Constitution requires 2/3 of the senators present to agree on the specific basis for conviction. A vote on the duplicitous article, however, could never provide certainty that a 2/3 majority had actually agreed upon a ground for conviction. Instead, such a vote could be the product of an amalgamation of votes resting on several different theories, no single one of which would have garnered 2/3 support if it had been presented separately. Accordingly, duplicitous articles like these are exhibited here are facially unconstitutional. And that's from House Trial Memo 2020. So, okay.
So the House trial memo, but that's what is that them saying? Well, that's what the defense said in 2020, and we're saying it again now.
I guess
I mean,
so.
that's not very compelling.
It's not the best authority.
Yeah, that this is what we said. This is what we argued in our brief last time. So we're just raising that same claim here by restating what we said back then. I don't know how that's a citation, but that's not an authoritative source in any sense.
Yeah.
Um,
That
but I do like raising this here because I think it's an important thing to raise in case
it's
it
just a
gets appealed to the
weird
Supreme Court.
citation.
If it's a weird citation, but the point that they're making is very important. If they want to raise it on an appeal, assuming he were to lose, that they could basically go to the court and say this charge here was so inartfully drafted that even though he lost the vote, we have no idea if there really were 2/3 who were willing to convict him on the same basis.
Right.
It's like, there's incitement, there's insurrection, and then there's also and there's also that he's gambling drunk, and we don't know which one of them was the basis for impeachment here. It's just this whole. But some people picked A, some people picked B, some people liked A and C. It's just like a whole confusing thing. And then maybe if you broke it down into the way it's proper, they never would have gotten 2/3 on any of them.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah, that's the problem with it. As noted in our previously filed answer to the charges, by charging multiple alleged wrongs in one article, the House of Representatives have made it impossible to guarantee compliance with the constitutional mandate in Article 1, Section 3, Clause 6, that permits a conviction only by at least 2/3 of the members. The House charge fails by interweaving different allegations, rather than breaking them out into counts of alleged individual instances of misconduct. Rule 23 of the Rules of Procedure and Practice in the Senate when sitting on impeachment trials provides in pertinent part that an article of impeachment shall not be divisible thereon. Because the article at issue here alleges multiple wrongs in the single article, it would be impossible to know if 2/3 of the members agreed on the entire article or just on parts as the basis for the vote to convict. The House failed to adhere to strict Senate rules and instead chose to make the articles as broad as possible intentionally in the hopes that some senators might agree with parts and other senators agree with the other parts. But that when these groups of senators were added together, the House might achieve the appearance of 2/3 in agreement, when those 2/3 of members in reality did not concur on the same allegations interwoven into an overbroad article designed for just such a purpose. Whew! The article fails to state an impeachable offense as a matter of law.
We're coming to the home stretch here.
Yep.
We're coming to the home stretch.
Just a
This
couple
is like the
pages
last
left.
argument. Yeah,
Yep.
This is the last argument, and we're almost finished here. It's very exciting.
The articles of impeachment also fail because, as former D.C. Assistant Attorney General Jeffrey Scott Shapiro explains, the president didn't commit incitement or any other crime as it relates to the allegation in the article. Quote, in the District of Columbia, it's a crime to intentionally or recklessly act in such a manner to cause another person to be in reasonable fear and to incite or provoke violence where there is a likelihood that such violence will ensue. The president didn't mention violence on Wednesday, much less provoke or incite it. He said, I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. District law defines a riot as a public disturbance which, by tumultuous and violent conduct, or the threat thereof, creates grave danger of damage or injury to the property or persons. When Mr. Trump spoke, there was no public disturbance, only a rally. The disturbance came later at the Capitol by a small minority who entered the perimeter and broke the law. The president's critics want him charged for inflaming the emotions of angry Americans. That alone does not satisfy the elements of any criminal offense, and therefore his speech is protected by the Constitution that members of Congress are sworn to support and defend. It matters greatly that the president did not commit a crime because the constitutional requirement for action that is grounds for impeachment is a high crime or misdemeanor. Quote, by limiting impeachment to cases of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors, the framers restricted impeachment to specific offenses against already known and established law. That was a deliberate choice designed to constrain the impeachment power. In keeping with that restriction, every prior presidential impeachment in our history has been based on alleged violations of existing law, indeed criminal law. The terminology of high crimes and misdemeanors makes clear that an impeachable offense must be a violation of established law. The impeachment clause did not confer upon Congress a roving license to make up new standards of conduct for governmental officials and to permit removal from office merely on a conclusion that the conduct was bad if there was not an existing law that it violated. House Democrats' theory on insurrection collapses at the threshold because it fails to describe any violation of law whatsoever. Aside from the decided lack of causation that the evidence demonstrably proves, Mr. Trump's speech was well within the long understood protection of the First Amendment. A person does not lose his fundamental right to speak his mind just because he is the president. What do you think about this argument in general?
No crime, no impeachment.
Yeah. I don't think it's
I mean,
accurate. Maybe
why? Because of the last impeachment.
I think maybe it should be accurate. I just don't think it is accurate. I think that Congress can impeach a president for whatever they want.
Why?
Because
You don't agree that high crimes and misdemeanors is a limitation on what creates impeachable grounds?
the reason I say no is because there is no, like, high crimes and misdemeanors is not defined anywhere. And it necessarily includes non-criminal conduct.
Why?
Well, I guess because I should say non-statutorily criminal conduct. It doesn't say a statutory criminal act.
Okay. And I think the reason it says that, first of all, I think misdemeanors had a different meaning than the legal definition of misdemeanor today.
Yeah,
I
well,
mean,
okay,
misdemeanor, I
yeah.
think in 1789 had a completely different meaning. I think than I
That's
think
true because felonies in 1789 had a different meaning too. All of them carried the death penalty. Uh,
right.
and so misdemeanors
That I
would
did not know. That I did not know. But I'm saying is the point is that the change in English language with respect to what these words actually meant then, just because our language changed doesn't mean that it changes what the intent of the Constitution is. I don't think misdemeanors means if he has an affair that he can be impeached.
sure.
I mean, do you disagree with that, or do you think that in theory, let's say, I mean, today in 2021, sadly, our society has devolved to the point that a person having an affair is not a big deal,
Right.
and it becomes public knowledge. But even as recently as 1988, Gary Hart was going to run for president, or in 84, I think 88, Gary Hart was a guy who was the leading Democratic candidate, and he ended up having to scrap his entire candidacy because he was found to be having an affair. Now, and that's how it had been for 200 years.
Right.
Hamilton lost, as we talked about yesterday, Hamilton lost any chance of the presidency once his scandal came out. So, my question to you is this: do you think that if Hamilton was a president, that anyone would have said, well, because of what happened with Reynolds, now you can be impeached?
I think that was the threat.
I don't think so. I don't think that he legally. I think he felt he was unelectable. I don't think that that would be a basis to remove a president. Jefferson, with Jefferson's relationship with his slave, I don't think anyone, his political opponents, ever thought that they could raise that as a basis to have him removed from office.
Sure.
I don't. I think misdemeanor means a crime. That's my point. I think misdemeanor does mean a crime, and that it's it doesn't mean jaywalking. It means something that they consider a pretty egregious crime,
Yeah.
and that if it's not a crime on the books, it's not a crime that anyone could ever see any kind of prison time for. in that case that there is no basis at all to impeach. That's my perspective of impeachment in general, because I happen to think as wide as we are in free speech, that's how narrow we should be in what should be impeachable grounds. I think you
Sure.
should need to cross some serious, serious lines to be impeached. But
Yeah.
that's my take on it. What's your take on it? Look, we just finished this whole thing. Unless you can, I don't know if you read the conclusion or not.
Yeah,
But
we'll hit the conclusion in just a second, but I did
right.
want
But
to
my
talk
question,
about this
I'm
section.
curious now. What is your take as far as what should be impeachable
Without
under
having
under
without having the citation handy, which is bothering me, I remember reading something, and it bothers me because I don't remember how good the authority was, but basically that that it's such a political process, and that the language was ambiguous for the purpose of leaving possibility that there wouldn't be a criminal remedy against the president. So if there's not a criminal remedy, but impeachability is the same remedy, or is the remedy, then it would necessarily encompass a non-criminal act that was still damaging to the United States. And it may be from a Federalist paper, but I can't remember which one. And so, the idea is that you could do a lawful act that would cause damage to the country, and they would want that to stop. I think, well, hypothetically, we had this discussion yesterday when you mentioned like President Trump gives the nuke codes to Putin, right?
I mean, an easier thing. Here's. I mean, yeah, and you hit me up and tried dancing around it by saying, well, maybe that's not illegal,
Maybe
and I
it's
could have
not,
given you an
though.
example of, okay, fine. Let's say on January 20th, everyone is gathering together for Biden being sworn in, and Donald Trump would go up there to the steps with a semi-automatic rifle and just start blowing people away,
Well,
like
that's
literally start
clearly
killing people.
illegal.
Should he be impeached? He's still president. Should he be impeached?
Yeah, no, I want him convicted for the crime
But not. You don't want him impeached even because.
because I don't think he would get there. Like, I don't think they would get the impeachment done before he leaves office.
Right.
And like his removal from office at that point is not my primary concern. His
Right.
criminal punishment is my primary issue.
Okay, fine. So you came back to this issue to make which point exactly?
So, but let's go to a legal act that overtly harms the country. So, in his power as commander in chief, he maybe not as okay as sole organ of
I'll
foreign
give I'll give you
relations.
one. I'll give you one. I'll
Okay,
give you one. Okay,
a
he
legal
takes
act that harms the country.
a legal act that harms the country. He goes into the mint and he basically orders that all of the money that the mint is holding in the state of Florida gets dumped into the Atlantic Ocean.
Okay,
All right. So
yeah.
he's devaluing the American dollar and
or
basically
or he gives
literally
it to North
throwing away money.
Korea. How about he gives it to North Korea?
Well, that you started trying to say maybe that's their bases to do it. And look, that's what we did with Iran. you know,
Yeah,
so so giving it to North Korea, you can say, well, maybe that's part of his foreign affairs policy, which is beneficial to the country in one way or another.
sure. Okay, so
So
he just throws it into the sea. Like, get in
yeah,
the sea. Uh,
yeah, and causes pollution of our oceans by doing so. So
which might be a
no
crime.
possible right. So my point is no possible benefit, no real crime, other than causing America a loss of valuable resources.
I mean I think that's a possible impeachable offense. Yeah, like if he causes significant damage, it's like his second year in office, right? So he's not going to leave office or none of that stuff. He's right in the middle of it. He causes significant, catastrophic financial harm. He causes, like Zimbabwe inflation, right? Through an act that is not like just there was a stock market bubble or something weird. I think that's impeachable. I mean, I think that's part of the nature of it. I think that's why
Okay,
it's a
I'll
political
give you
remedy.
I'll give you an example that actually happened.
Okay,
AOC in her first month in Congress,
sure.
she basically Amazon had a deal that they were going to be moving into Long Island City, which was part of her jurisdiction.
Right, and she
Part
shuts
of
it
that
down.
part of that deal was that they were going to get a tax break, which meant that they weren't going to have to. It's not that they were going to get money; it's just they wouldn't have to pay taxes on a certain amount of revenue that they got, or based on salaries they were paying. It was some sort of deal that they had, and she's like, "Why should the rich get a tax break? I don't agree with this." And they lost 25,000 jobs, I think it was, overnight and millions of dollars in revenue for the city because she didn't understand the difference between a tax break and
Yeah.
and tax rebate and tax like she just didn't understand basic economic terms, and she didn't like that her name wasn't on the deal, so she kiboshed the entire thing. There was no benefit at all to her constituents. If anything, she completely blew up in their face. Is that something that's impeachable, that she should be impeached, that she completely hurt her own constituents for no possible benefit to her jurisdiction?
Um, Impeachable, maybe, yeah. Uh, recall like that's specific to her jurisdiction, so I think a recall's maybe more appropriate. Like, cause
Well,
she,
how would a recall work exactly? Isn't a recall like a
I
vote
think you can
type of thing?
recall a congressman, can't you?
What happens when you recall a congressman?
You unelect them effectively.
So that's what is that what happened with the one who had that scandal in California in the 25th district there, who with her affair with her intern or something like that? That
Maybe.
woman.
I don't know.
All right.
But
Well,
I again, I think there is a circumstance where there is not a legal criminal remedy where we go, okay, this is bad though. Like, I just think there is. I think there, and I think that I inform that separately by having the court's lack of reviewability of the impeachment articles in the first place. Like, I don't think we've never had a court say, you know what, we're going to review these articles of impeachment. They've always kind of strayed away from that.
all right. Well, I want you to focus. I know it's late, but I want you to focus with me for a second here because I want to make the this point. There's a reason I compared this to the free speech and said the
Yeah.
same way I want to have free speech, I want to have wide latitude here on not on making things as limited as possible in impeachment. Because to me, it is the same issue. It's the same exact issue as free speech because the same way people should be free to express themselves, we need our politicians to be free to make mistakes without without fear of being judged.
Yeah.
So when you have politicians who are actually trying their best, the same way there's a famous case with Henry Ford where he had I think it was Dodge v. Ford. Did you ever learn this case in law school? Because it was actually something I learned in law school.
I might have.
Um, it came up in corporations law, and the
I didn't
issue
take court.
there. Okay, so the issue in that particular case of Henry Ford, who was a massive anti-Semite, was a brilliant man, brilliant businessman, and part of what he did, he was actually partners with Dodge brothers, the ones who later broke off from him and formed Dodge Cars.
Right.
And when he they sued him because he came up with a philosophy that it's better I want to lower the price of cars so that more people can buy cars because cars are something that every American needs to benefit society. And I'm going to lower the price of cars just to make it cheaper so that more Americans can have my product. The Dodge brothers, who were investors in his company, were outraged by this because they're like, what do you mean we're going to lose money here and there's no benefit? We could charge so much more and make more money. And he ended up losing. And the court explained that the reason why he lost in that case is because he was not acting in the best interest of the corporation. He had no objective of acting in their best interest. So if his mindset had been, well, we'll sell more cars by making it cheaper, even if it was a stupid decision, that would be okay. And I'm coming to the point here.
Yeah. Yeah.
But because his objective was purely altruistic and against the interests of the company, that's why the Dodge brothers won that case, and they found that he had violated and breached his fiduciary duty as the CEO or the owner of the company, and to the board of directors that he basically had breached his duty to them because he has a fiduciary duty to try and maximize their dollars. So
Right.
if he made a stupid decision, then made the exact same decision of cutting the price, and his motivation was the proper motivation of helping the company, that would be okay. But because he admitted that his motivation was improper, that's why he ended up losing the case of the Dodge brothers. Similarly, when it comes to a member of Congress or a president they have to be given that wide berth to make good decisions or bad decisions without being second guessed that maybe I'm going to be impeached for this decision. As long as their motivation is that they're acting in the best interest of the country, in that case, they too, if you look at the country being a corporation, as long as that's what their motivation is, they should not be impeachable. Now, if you're going to tell me that we should be able to impeach someone because he's intentionally acting against the interest of the company of the country, so I guess I can get on board with that. That even if it's not a crime, that it's sort of like doing what Henry Ford was doing. That you're not, your goal is you're sworn into office to protect the Constitution, which really means representing your constituents,
Yeah.
and accordingly, just like the chairman of the board has to look out for the company, you as a politician have to look out for your constituents, whether it's the entire country or your jurisdiction. You should be looking out for them. As long as you're looking out for them, and that's your agenda, even if you're an idiot and you mess it up terribly, that you should be free from any concern of being impeached. So that's my thought. That's my thought on it. And I never had this thought until you raised this question at me, as far as
Sure.
lacking a crime. I'm glad we had this, because it sort of gives me an idea to flesh out in my mind what seems appropriate and consistent with our American jurisprudence. So, but now that came up with this whole monologue and this whole legal reasoning thing, where do you sit in relation to what I just threw out there?
The only thing I think is that we may have a disagreement over what I think it should be versus what I think it is. I'm more in line with you on where I think it should be. I do think there should be a limitation on it. Where I think it is falls down to I don't think the Supreme Court will review it. So I think it basically comes down to whatever Congress wants it to be.
So you're
That's
saying
the
right. You're
reality.
saying the reality is not the ideal that it should be,
Right.
but that the reality is, and I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
That Congress, and it'll change 10 years from now, be completely different depending on what Congress thinks it should be 10 years from now, or 50 years from now, or 100 years from now.
Right. So, yeah, I agree that it should be limited and constrained. I just don't think that it is because I don't think the Supreme Court will review it. But anyway, let's wrap up. We're
Yeah,
almost done. We're so close, and I'm dying.
yeah. You seem like you're fading here, so I'm trying. That's what I'm trying to. And I'm hitting you with like complex legal reasoning, as far as like I'm crossing over from free speech to
Learning
corporate
about the
law to
history of
impeachment.
manufacturing automobiles.
So after you finish conclude here, I'll tell you, like, this guy Henry Ford was a fascinating. He was a fascinating guy. Like I said,
Yeah. Oh
a
no, I know.
he hated Jews. He was literally a Nazi supporter. Like he was like, there was like a Nazi party in America, and he was like its strongest advocate. Like he paid for publications to promote Nazism in America. That's
But
how
yet,
much he.
the interesting
And
thing, of
yet,
course, is he ends up creating the assembly line, which leads to the production of U.S. bombers, which gives us the ability to win the
yes,
war. I mean,
that's true. That's true. And I mean, he's also like a fascinating person with respect to, like, I heard he was once asked, like, what would you do if you became poor? And his response was, I'll never be poor. I may go broke. If I go broke, I'll just make it back. And that's why I'll never be poor. That's the difference between being poor and being broke. And that's a really, you know what, I think it's a really healthy philosophy that I think it's something I would convey to my children. It's all about your mindset. If your
right.
mindset is, I'll never be poor. I may be broke today, I'm not poor, because tomorrow I'm not going to be broke. So that's a real American fighting spirit, which I think all Americans should have that perspective.
Yeah, and that was, Henry Ford never struck anybody as the type of guy who wasn't going to work. Like,
Right.
well, what happens if you're going to be poor? Are you saying I'm not trying? Like, I'm not out there doing something? Like, what are you talking about? Like,
Yeah, exactly. I'm always going to be fighting.
yeah, I'm going to be out there working. What am I going to do? Sit around? That's nonsense. We
Eh,
have such a different society from that now. It's amazing.
it's so true. Is
Uh,
what happened?
I thought
Did
I
it
heard
fly?
a kid, but
Yeah. Everyone
okay.
okay?
Yep, everything's good.
Mm.
Bad Vibe says unpopular theory. Many Republicans flip and convict Trump just to open the door to post-office impeachment of other politicians. If the Republicans even suggest such idea, the Dems will stop the impeachment tomorrow. I don't think they would. Honestly, I think they'd call him on it and let him run with it. But
Okay.
that's my opinion there. And then let's read this conclusion, and then we're done
Let's
with
do
this
it.
document. Conclusion: the article of impeachment presented by the House is unconstitutional for a variety of reasons, any of which alone would be grounds for immediate dismissal. Taken together, they demonstrate conclusively that indulging House Democrats' hunger for this political theater is a danger to our republic democracy and the rights that we hold dear. Reasons for dismissal include the Senate of the United States lacks jurisdiction over the 45th president because he holds no public office from which he can be removed, and the Constitution limits the authority of the Senate in cases of impeachment to removal from office as the prerequisite active remedy allowed the Senate under our Constitution. Number 2, the Senate of the United States lacks jurisdiction over the 45th president because he holds no public office from which he can be removed, rendering the article of impeachment moot and a non-justiciable question. Number 3, should the Senate act on the article of impeachment initiated in the House of Representatives, it will have passed a bill of attainder in violation of Article 1, Section 9, Clause 3 of the United States Constitution. Number 4, the allegations in the article of impeachment are self-evidently wrong, as demonstrated by the evidence included in the transcript of the president's actual speech, and the allegation failed to meet the constitutional standard for any crime, let alone impeachable offenses. Number 5, the House of Representatives deprived the 45th president of due process of law in rushing to issue the article of impeachment and by ignoring its own procedures and precedents going back to the mid-19th century. The lack of due process included, but was not limited to, its failure to conduct any meaningful committee review of other investigation, engage in any full and fair consideration of evidence in support of the article, as well as the failure to conduct any full and fair discussion by allowing the 45th president's positions to be heard in the House chamber. No exigent circumstances under the law were present, excusing the House of Representatives' rush to judgment, as evidenced by the fact that they then held the article for another 12 days. Number 6, the article of impeachment violates the 45th president's right to free speech and thought guaranteed under the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. Number 7, the article is constitutionally flawed in that it charges multiple instances of allegedly impeachable conduct in a single article. Senate should dismiss these charges and acquit the president because this is clearly not what the framers wanted or what the Constitution allows. Respectfully submitted, Bruce Castor, David Schoen, Michael T. Vanderveen. There we go.
Beautiful job. Congratulations. Let's just take a shot before we a little what my people would call a l'chaim.
What are you drinking today? Same stuff?
Yeah, I had this bottle sitting here for 3 nights now. So fortunately it doesn't go bad, right?
I changed to Old Forester Prohibition style 1920 bourbon.
All right.
This is 115 proof. It's got a little bit of kick to it.
All right. This is in celebration of that guy's birthday from 2 nights ago.
Right? Ah, yes. Cheers.
Happy birthday. Cheers. Okay.
Delicious. All right. Well,
so my question about this conclusion and the whole thing here. Well, first of all, scale of 1 to 10, what would you rate? What would you rate this brief?
The brief, I mean, it's at least an 8. I think it's really a very, very good brief.
I would give it a 9. I give it a 9.
Yeah.
I think it's very, very solid. I do question why I think that the First Amendment right, I think that should have been pushed up a little earlier.
Yeah.
I think that's way that's what makes it open and shut.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a big one. And I think they maybe could have even played up like how important that is. I think they spent too long on the section of, well, this wasn't incitement. Because I think they nailed that really early in their incitement argument. And then they went on for like 5 more pages, and it's like, okay, we got it. You're right. You were right earlier. You're still right now, but it's getting boring at this point.
Yeah.
So it's yeah.
So basically that it's similar. This is almost, if you think about it, it's a foreshadow of their oral argument, where it's like their best points are not really coming out at the gate necessarily, but they're sort of buried a little bit too deep in the back.
And I think that's actually exemplified here in the conclusion. They nailed the constitutionality for the first 1, 2, 3. Well, first 2, relief are constitutionality and jurisdiction. Next is bill of attainder. Next is the evidence it shows it's wrong, so he beats the charge. And then they go to due process. And then
due process is like the last one. That should have been the last one.
Yeah, and then they go to free speech at 6.
Yeah.
And then the duplicitous nature. I think they hit constitutionality, then they hit free speech, or they interchange those two. Maybe free speech first. Just go with the founders. Like put the free speech first, then constitutionality, for the jurisdiction. Um,
Especially because you're not aiming it at these cancel culture lefties sitting there who are going to vote against him. You're really aiming it at the heart of what everyone from the right believes in.
right.
Like even Romney can get behind free speech.
Yeah. Yeah, as a Mormon, Romney should be highly supportive of the First Amendment because we tried to get rid of those people several times.
Yeah.
They should have written that in their thing. We tried to get rid of Mormons, so even Mitt Romney should have respect for the First Amendment.
That would be that would have put this at a 10.
I think so
I was
too.
at 9.
Uh no, they interestingly, like, they sandwich one of their main good points in the middle of their brief as opposed to
Yeah.
leading with it or closing with it. And I
Yeah.
mean, I
So
don't
now I think this answers our question that they wrote it, right? We
oh
had that question a couple
I
days
think,
ago.
yeah, I think they definitely wrote it. I didn't think they took someone else's work. I
Yeah.
just I just don't like, cuz if I take someone else's work and then I write my bill and they're like, "Well, what'd you do? You just took someone else's brief. I don't even know why I'm paying you." Like it's hard to, well, Mr. President, we had to change it. No, no, no. I gave you a good brief. Like, I don't think you
It
take
was the
someone
best
else's
brief.
work.
It was the best brief in the world.
It's a terrific
Yeah.
brief. I fired the guy who made it, but I rewrote it. It's better. No, it's I think they sandwiched in so that's a criticism. Again, having that agency and thing in there just felt weird. It breaks the flow of that entire section. But that section
Yep.
was getting really long and rambly, and I think maybe they just ran out of editing time because
Yeah.
at some point you just got to file the damn brief.
Yeah. It's like if we don't file it now, we have nothing. So let's get
Right.
it in as it is.
And so maybe they ran out of editing time on that section, and that's why it's so, like, that section is really meandery. On
How many man hours do you think they put into this thing?
78 pages, it's really well sourced. And it's sourced all over the place. It's sourced
Yeah.
media. It's sourced. It's not like they just plugged this into Westlaw, right? And like got a
Right.
bunch of citations. God, I don't know. 30 or 40 at least?
What?
You think 30 or 40 hours? I don't know.
30 or 40 hours?
What do you think?
I think 10 times that.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know. I work
30 or 40
alone.
hours.
I work alone
30
and I don't write 78-page briefs on impeachment. So
I think they put it. I literally think at least 200 man hours went into this.
okay, that could
Because I
be.
think that when you do all that sourcing, all the research, all the stuff, all the different arguments, and then look, just even writing 78 pages would probably take 15 hours.
It does take a
If
bunch
you
of
had to
time.
type this up,
I don't
well, I
know.
mean, look, I guess people type faster, but yeah, and then review it for sure. This was at least 200 hours for sure. That's why I'm trying to think like what his bill was, and yeah, on this brief, it easily could have been over 100,000. I'm not
I
kidding.
wouldn't pay 100. Like, this is a good brief, but I wouldn't pay 100 grand for it.
You're Donald Trump. What's the difference to you? 100 versus 40.
I just, look, that's how you get to be able to have what money Donald Trump has by knowing the difference between paying 100 grand and
Okay.
paying 40.
Oh, look who's playing Jude now. Okay, listen. Let me make. I'll tell you this much. I once was I was fighting against a pretty big law firm one time.
Austin Williams, this is not a tax dollar expense. Donald Trump is probably paying for this privately, just so you know.
Yeah, this is not covered by the government at all. Quite the contrary. It's the government paying against it. It's the government. Now he's on the other side.
Yeah.
But yeah, I actually once had someone who I was fighting against a big firm once, and they brought a motion for summary judgment, and I had a co-defendant in there, a different attorney, and he looked at it, he's like, did you look at this motion? And I was like, yeah. He's like, I showed this to like my secretary, and and it was like this phone book thing. He goes, this is a Mercedes. That's how much this cost. It cost this document is literally a Mercedes.
Yeah.
And like when you think about it from that perspective, it's like, wow, yeah, that's crazy. Like this stupid little thing that they put together
Is a
was not
rural
little.
home.
Yeah, it's a rural home. Yes, it's this or a rural home. Which do you want? Pick one. And then they
Uh,
lost the motion too. It's like, wow, sucks to
yeah,
be you.
yeah. I'm not involved in litigation that requires this much work. So like on a single brief. So for me, if I'm writing a 70-page motion or a 70-page document, I'm writing it myself, and if it's taking me more than 40 hours, I'm already tying the noose. Like I'm standing on the chair going, I hate my life. So I cannot imagine
Yeah.
spending, but
There's no way this was done in 30 or 40 hours. This was a lot more.
I could have
This was a
done,
lot more.
I could have done this
And
for,
also you have to realize it went through at least like 4 different attorneys' eyes.
I could have done this
Like,
for Trump in 40 hours.
no, you couldn't have.
Yes,
Who
I
do you
could.
think you are? There's no way.
I
There's no
could have done
way.
it.
How many words do you type per minute?
At least 6.
I'm one of these guys. So do you know how to really type? Like really type?
I can do okay. I probably type like 70, 80 words a minute, something like that.
Oh, that's actually pretty good. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I'm not like
Yeah,
secretary level, but I'm passable.
I'm like 35 to 40. And I'll type like basically I'll use like 2 to 3 fingers, but not like I'm not doing that. It's more ah.
Oh, you killed it. What did you
I didn't
do?
kill anything. Stop. I'm back. I'm coming back. All right, go back. Yeah, but at the same time, I'm like sort of like a hunt and peck guy, but I know where I'm hunting and where I'm pecking. So like it'll take me like half a second. I'll be like, you hear that?
Yeah, I gotcha. I gotcha.
That's about how fast I'm typing.
I type so fast that you can't even hear the keys click. I'm
Oh, so
typing
you're a real
right now.
typist. You're a real
No,
typist.
no, I'm joking. I'm just kidding.
Okay.
No, I type
So look,
okay.
maybe
I
it
type
does go
okay.
fast. Maybe it does go faster with others. I'm just telling you that something like this, something like this would take. I would certainly spend 150 hours on something like this.
Oh yeah, yeah. Kidding aside, if I'm in the position of Castor and Schoen, right? Like I'm obviously spending way more time. You're dealing with an impeachment, and again, they're sourcing a lot of articles. That to me is what really is taking a ton of time.
Yeah,
Their
and
citations are
yeah,
crazy in here.
and by the way, this is just what they're showing you. You don't know the research that just didn't make the cut.
Yeah, that's true. I wasn't even thinking about that. I was literally thinking, how long would it take me to draft what's on the page, not all the stuff that I'd leave out. So that's a good
Right,
point too.
right. I mean, when if they put 75 pages in here, I'm sure they had 100 pages, and then they're like, no, cut this, no, move this over here, all the editing and stuff like that.
Yeah, and they've got for every page they write, they've got at least 2 people reviewing it. Like you said, like 4 attorneys looked at this thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a lot of work.
Do we have super chats to cover here?
Yeah, just a
Because
couple.
I don't want to. I know that we hit 3 a.m. We meet our deadline. I think we did really well here.
I
I
think
really
so
enjoyed
too.
this, by the way.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed doing this with you. At least we know one guy enjoyed it. Whoever was that cut you that nice. Someone enjoyed
Sword
it.
and Scale. Yeah, he's great. He's great.
Yeah.
By the way, guys, check out Sword and Scale's podcast. Seriously, it's the OG true crime podcast, and Mike, who runs it, is a great dude. Check it out. You can find about all your horrific murders that you want, and like people who eat babies and stuff. Really, really awful, cringy stuff that you hope to never encounter in real life. Mario Carter 13 says Chief Justice Roberts Skypes into the trial with a cat filter. I heard you were missing a spineless pussy. Damn. Wow.
Okay, that was the best one of the 3 days. I think
That was
was.
good.
Uh,
Wolfman says, hypothetically, if Trump is convicted in the Senate, could he have some legal recourse through SCOTUS since they didn't have an actual SCOTUS judge preside over the trial? He could certainly make the argument, and I would if I were him. I don't think it's going to come to that, which I think, in some ways, I think it's a shame just because we won't see a Supreme Court case on it.
mhm.
And there's so much there's a lot of egregious stuff in this impeachment that I think the Supreme Court should hear, but I don't think we'll get there because I don't think he's going to lose.
Whatever case you're hoping the Supreme Court was going to take, they're not going to. So
I just don't think they'll have a case to take because he's not going to lose, so he won't need the remedy.
that's true. Yeah, that's true.
Crusader Saracen says, Nick, I hope this guy makes more appearances in the future because I think he's great. In fact, I think he's so great, I hereby bestow upon him an honorary inward pass with the hard R. Congratulations, my good sir. You've earned it.
Thank you. Thank
Mal-
you very much, my brother. Or
Malik,
do I
bro-
would have. I was going to say my brother, but you gave me the ER pass, so I'm
yeah,
going to say
brother,
my
please.
brother. Yeah, my
Brother.
brother.
Malik Foxon says the disconnect is the N-word is a term of endearment for us, but for some reason we can't let it be a term of endearment for anyone that's not us. It's simultaneously a term we use as a tool to bludgeon non-blacks with if they get caught using it retarded. That's the same way I feel about honky. Edris Rex says, I think I cracked the code on why AOC thinks Ted Cruz tried to kill her. The Zodiac's back at it again, boys. He couldn't lay dormant forever. No, if he was back at it, she'd already be dead. Clay Davis says, they want to talk to me about vote fixing in Baltimore? Shit. Crusader Saracen says, the nose is the source of his power. Ultimate power. Silky Johnson says, hey, gents, with the insanity of all these AIDS-filled Dems and their reeling hysteria of word policing and just making things up, what do you think was a factor into what the current situation is? Did it start with protecting Obama or before that? I noticed a change during Obama. I really think the country was going kind of like this and then went like this somewhere after 2008. It got ugly.
It would take me. It would take me 5 minutes to explain how Obama single-handedly destroyed this country. If you want, I can do it. I don't mind doing it.
We should do it on your show sometime.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome. What I learned today is that I need to get 4,000 viewable hours in order for YouTube to respect me at all. And I'm only apparently at 670.
Yeah. So there's a professional advice. There's a couple ways to do it. I mean, short videos don't produce lots of view hours. Mm-hmm. Live streams, if you can sustain an audience, produce an absolute ton of view hours, though.
How do I do that?
So you get a live stream, and then you have someone like me come on, and we hang out, and we get people to watch, and then we get people to come in and watch a lot of hours, and we do a couple hour show, and then we get.
You really do that for me?
Yeah, of course.
Really?
You spent 9 hours on my show this week alone. I'm not going to come hang out on your show.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, so we do a 2 or 3 hour show. We maybe do another one if we have to. We get a bunch of people to come watch. Stop crying.
So nice.
No, that's what you do. That's how you get those 4,000 hours.
That'd be great.
Yeah. So
that'd be
we'll set that up. I think that'll be a great show.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much.
Yeah, no problem. Obi-Wan Kenobi says Vader was right. He did not knock Padme up. It was me. I was tapping it long before Anakin showed up, so I Jedi mind tricked him into clapping them cheeks. He figured it out when we were on the Death Star. Joke's on them. You can't subpoena a ghost, bitch. Bassmaster says it would be amazing if Jim Jordan, while arguing with House members, just got up and started dropping them with stone cold stunners. Choke slamming AOC and Pelosi and leg dropping Waters with Jim Ross doing play-by-play. Good God Almighty, it killed him. Night of Hope says, talk to Nick about how he thinks presidents have nearly unlimited king-like power in the Constitution, despite the fact that we wrote the Declaration of Independence and became a separate nation expressly to remedy such an officer running the British system. Well, we could do that if you want. But Crusader says, would Biden killing the Keystone XL pipeline fracking ban fall under not a crime but stupid, harmful to America, impeachable offense?
Yes.
Given it killed American energy independence and wasn't intended to serve as constituents but appease hippies and commies? The answer is if you have enough Republicans. Right? Like
yes. That. Who said that? That was a very, very insightful comment. Who said that?
Crusader Saracen.
Good job, Crusader Saracen.
Night of Hope says, hey, Joe, free advice because I like you. Try typingclub.com. It's free and you can learn how to type. Really, if you're out there writing briefs, typing twice as fast would make your life easier and your clients happier, man. No excuses, buddy. Ha ha. But it would make your billable hours lower. We don't want to do that. Trying to ruin this man's livelihood.
I actually, with respect, I'm really I pride myself that in my billables, I do the opposite of what most lawyers do. And this is the one thing that like the my one of my pitches that I make to my clients when they're thinking about whether or not they want to pay me my obscene rates is that unlike any other lawyer I've ever heard of, I round down. So like, and because lawyers calculate in tenths of an hour,
Yeah.
so when you get on the phone for 2 minutes, they give you 1/10 of an hour, even though that's technically 6 minutes. And then as soon as you get to 7 minutes, they'll count that as 2/10 of an hour. So if you're paying $400 an hour, once you get to 7 minutes, you're at $80. Well, at 6 minutes, up to 6 minutes, you're at $40. And then, and they count in tenths of. I round down. So, and one of the reasons I do this is I tell my clients, which means the first tenth of an hour until you get to 6 minutes, I'm not going to charge you. So if you want to pick up the phone and call me and talk to me for under 6 minutes, it will be free. Just and that way, when clients get on the phone with me, especially if I'm really not in the mood to talk to them, I'm like, look, I don't have to charge you for this call, so like let's make it quick. And that way they get off the phone like in 5 minutes or less, and they feel like they won. And I'm like, I don't mind spending 5 minutes talking to anyone, especially clients who pay me money. So if they want to grab me for 5 minutes, I'm totally cool with it. And it's a win-win for both sides. So I guess that makes up for the fact that I don't have the Obi-Wan fingers that you have.
Yeah.
But
Hey guys, did you notice something? I just sent a comment in the chat. I got verified by YouTube while on this stream, so I now have a check mark.
wow,
So that was fun.
wow, this is like such a mutually beneficial relationship you and I have.
Yeah, this is working
This
out
is
well.
really, really, indeed. That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is that what comes with? Does anything come with that?
It's just like if I go in a chat and I type, people know it's really me. So if someone makes a Ricada law and like goes in and says like a bunch of N-words somewhere, if it doesn't have the check mark, it's not me.
Okay.
Which at some
So
point,
does that mean I have to worry about someone using Good Logic that way? That it'll just like become like.
it depends who you piss off and what circles you run in. Okay.
Okay.
My silver play button is actually in the it's I've been approved for it and it's been ordered. So it's 2 to 3 weeks out, Nick's Hex. Okay. Back to here. Kim C says, how many spelling bees has Joe won? He totally wins at Scrabble against you. That was for that vertripitude or whatever.
Vituperative. Yeah.
You got it.
Yeah, people don't like playing. I have a pretty funny Scrabble story from back when I was dating, but yeah, I'd say that for another time.
Crusader Saracen says, you just got a blue check mark. My esteem for you just fell immensely. My condolences to your newly diagnosed affliction. No, not Twitter. YouTube gave me the gray check mark. I don't have a blue check on Twitter. I have a gray check mark for verification on YouTube. Which you tend to have to be over 100,000 subscribers, and they don't always give it to you after that. So it's nice to get. Polyfrog says, the only Simpsons episode worth watching is Sneed. Corey Sight says, as Christians, Jesus is our Messiah, not any politician, so we do not act like a cult. Not that all conservatives are Christians, but in general. Ryan McCracken says, explain to me how legally that the closing of states doesn't directly break the Civil Rights Act of 1866. Should these governors not be removed? The governors should be removed. There you go. I don't need to explain it to you. I don't even think it needs the Civil Rights Act of 1866. Just in general, restricting the free travel and the free exchange of people between states is a violation of the core principles of our country.
Is that Whitmer impeachment still ongoing?
I don't know. I'm hoping. I talked to one of the lawyers who's actually sued Whitmer and won. He's also a guy representing a kid named Lucas Gerhard, which is a tragic case, just in general. I talked to him.
I think you told me about the Lucas Gerhard case like the first time I was on your show.
Yeah. I talked to his lawyer.
That was someone who was harassed or something like that. That's someone who like the police basically like really messed over.
He's a kid who took a picture of his AR-15 and said, "I'm bringing this up
and
north
he's been
to
in
melt the
prison ever
snowflake."
since.
Yeah, he's on house arrest, but he's been on house arrest for a year and 3 months now, and he spent 85 days in prison without trial, in jail without a hearing.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that sounds like a civil action.
It does. They're actually suing the prosecutor, which is hilarious. under Michigan's law on terroristic threats, there's a private cause of action created when a prosecutor is overzealous in prosecuting something that's facially protectable. And they found a super liberal professor to write an expert or to give expert testimony on why the free speech exception should apply to this kid, and that the entire prosecution is completely ridiculous. I mean, they found the most anti-gun liberal professor they could, who's like, no, this offends my sensibilities as someone who cares about free speech, and yeah, so they're working on it, but the courts are moving so slow. And anyway, I'm
I
hopefully
can't
gonna
believe.
have that guy on soon because
Yeah,
he's really cool.
yeah, he sounds
Damian.
good.
Damian says part of their argument was saying Trump knew they were going to riot. So does knowing and playing along possible incitement? No. You still have to, like, if he knows that they're going to riot, he couldn't have incited the riot. Those
That
are,
was where they mentioned the FBI had credible threat warnings, so that undercuts the possibility of incitement if it's already pre-planned.
yeah, if they're going to riot, you can't convince them to riot. That's
Yeah.
like you're going to buy a minivan. I'm like, hey man, you should get a minivan. Like, I know you're
That
on
would
the way
be
to buy it. Like, yeah, you should go get that minivan. I didn't incite you to buy it. You were doing it
that would be
already.
like that would be like charging the police officers who are waving them inside with incitement to riot.
Yeah,
Like they're already on their way in, we're waving you in. Oh, you just incited them to riot. What do you mean? They're already rioting. Like what can I do?
right. Timothy Reaper. Oh, by the way, Sword and Scale, one more time, since it was such a huge chat. Cheers, Nick. Cheers back to you, buddy. I'll even
Indeed.
take a little bit more of a nip just in celebration. Timothy Reaper says, I was watching the impeachment with my 4-year-old, and she, fighting back tears, she said to me, Dad, this is boring. Can we watch SpongeBob? Never happened, because if you're watching the impeachment, you were watching it on my channel, and no 4-year-old has ever called me boring.
There you go.
Ben Frail says, read Fred Phelps' online bio, Addicted to Hate. Solid Redfield Gaming says, don't forget that MaxiPad Waters once defended the individuals who attempted to murder Reginald Denny. Yeah, Bacon says, fear the beard. Yes. Fred Brickford.
The beard.
Fred Brickford, welcome to paralegal status. Loreddit Silver member says, I can just imagine Nick's grandparent when he got the knife saying, careful, kid, you cut your nose off with that knife. I got that nose from that grandfather. Don't you dare do that. Bass says, did you see the I'm Not a Cat Lawyer video? Yes. Did you? That was so funny.
That was awesome.
It makes it perfect that he's like the oldest Texan man on the planet.
Who is the guy who said it?
Yeah, he's like, I'm ready to proceed. I'm not a cat.
We even talked about whether or not they took judicial notice. We did the
Oh
whole
yeah,
thing.
that's right. The pause. Oh god. Cars in depth. Says Dodge v Ford was over Ford hoarding cash to build rogue plant rather than paying out dividends. Not about cheap cars. The cheap cars made that cash. There you go.
Wait a second. What did he say?
He said it was over Ford hoarding cash to build rogue plant rather than paying out dividends. Not about cheap cars. The cheap cars made the cash.
That's not my recollection. To be fair, I literally haven't looked at this case in 25 years.
This
so
is from Cars in Depth. So they may be a car person who might, I don't know. I'm just saying.
I'm gonna now I'm gonna look it up. It has been 25 years. I don't know how what they're saying there would fit in with the general principle that we got from that case, which is that you have to be working in the best interest of the company.
Well, if the shareholders are owed dividends and he was withholding cash to build something rather than paying out dividends that the shareholders are owed, then I guess that would be.
I'm not disputing that would be a basis for the Dodge brothers to sue. I'm only saying that the principle that it was brought up in the context of my class was specifically to learn that principle out, that you have to be working in the best interest of your directors and not against it. So I guess not paying dividends in theory could also fit in that way.
Yeah, I don't know. You can look it up if you want. I'm gonna.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check it out. Oh.
Crusader says, "Oh, a gray check mark. My bad. I was about to pray to the Lord to the Lord on yours and your family's behalf." Well, I always accept prayer anyway. Crusader Saracen says, "By the way, apparently Biden is considering travel restrictions on the state of Florida. Constitutionally, that motherfucker better not. Pardon my English.
How would he have a basis to do that?
I don't know, but if he does that, I'm going to go to the White House and I'm going to pee on his shoes."
Oh, you know what? He could if it's interstate. He could say
Seems
that
like
he
Congress would
can't.
have to do that.
Well, I'm saying like as far well within. I'm just saying like a federal rule would have to be something that's interstate as opposed to something that's
Yeah.
intrastate.
Look,
So
I'm thinking of going to Florida sometime soon. If he closes the state down, we're going to have words. I'm going to go to DC instead.
I'm supposed to be going there in April myself.
Let's see. Whereabouts? Do you mind sharing or do you not want to say that?
Over Passover, so we're probably gonna we go down to like Miami. Actually,
Oh,
usually Orlando. I have to check out. The wife is the one who makes these plans.
okay.
It's either gonna be Orlando or Miami. Why? Where are you gonna be?
Near Tampa.
Hmm.
I just don't know when
We
yet.
never go to we never go to Tampa. But it's in the past. It's I think it's usually been the Orlando area.
Orlando's not that far from Tampa. It's like an hour
Is
and a
it?
half.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It would be cool to meet you in person because like this whole Zoom thing is kind of.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know if I'm going to be down there when you're down there, but I'll let you know. I'll
Oh,
let
all
you
right.
know. If we can grab
Cool.
a scotch in person. Um,
Indeed.
Chris, yeah. Okay, so he says, constitutionally speaking and public perception wise, how would that play? It looks like retaliation for DeSantis telling the feds to shove it, and I think it would be a bad move. Seems like a big push towards secession to me. I think people are overplaying any talks of secession. I don't think that's likely to happen in our lifetimes, but maybe I'm wrong. Raytard the Gordon says, my IQ is higher than the entire stream combined. I could beat all of you at chess at the same time. Crusader Saracen says, I watched the
Were you
impeachment.
supposed to read that in the Trump voice or?
No. This is a different guy. This is a
Oh,
specific guy who is suing me because someone told him that I was counsel for someone he was suing.
oh,
I'm not.
okay.
But he said, you're the lawyer for the person I'm suing. I still don't actually know who it is. I mean, I have an idea, but he's never asked me. He's never said, are you a lawyer for X party? So he's
Why
like,
would that be a basis for him to sue you individually, though?
this man is insane.
Oh, okay.
Literally, like legitimately, I did 3 shows on his direct messages to me, and I think I responded a total of maybe 30 times. And he sent me well over 500 messages. I mean, it was
I'm sure.
crazy.
What? How does he direct message you? Like
Uh,
you actually have you follow him that he's direct messaging you?
he direct messaged me on Instagram.
Oh,
I don't know.
I don't
He
know.
just started
I
sending
don't
me
know. I
this
don't. I don't know.
big slew of
I don't know how
messages.
Instagram. I don't know how Instagram works. I just know that I can only direct message people that we follow each other, not anyone else. That's why I'm wondering, like, why
Uh,
you would have a lunatic that you're following.
no, that's on the person who, like on Twitter. Um, for example, my direct messages are open. You don't have to follow me at all. You can just send them to me. So that's a setting on Twitter.
Oh, that is?
Yeah.
This shows you how new I am to social media. I literally signed up to social media after lockdown started. That's when I joined Twitter, and
Yeah.
I started making YouTube shows like 3 months ago.
Yeah. It's
So
this guy's literally crazy. And again, it's all because someone jokingly told him that I was their attorney. And so then he sent me a message. He's like, you're going to put a litigation hold on all your communications between you and your clients because I'm going to subpoena them. As I sent back, that's not how that works. This isn't how that's going to happen. And then he kept coming at me and he's suing me for all sorts of stuff, filing ethics complaints, called my local sheriff. I don't think he's actually done any of this, but that's what he says he's suing. So he's a legit crazy man, and you're on the internet now, so you'll run into one eventually.
yeah,
It,
good times.
they're fun. Crusader says, I watched the impeachment with my 4-year-old. She said, F you, Dad. Don't make up imaginary quotes I never said to score bullshit clout points on the internet. Eat shit. Also, Alexandria Cortez is a dumbass and a phony and a liar.
Yes, and yes.
That's the first one I believe. Okay. Angry Baneling says, Jen Paskey is hot and I'd smash. # no regrets. Oh, buddy. Angry Baneling says she can circle back on me anytime. No regrets. Bad Vibe says, wait, you don't need no stinking check mark. Your nose is all the verification we need. CJ says, that's why Grandpa knew you'd cut it off, Nikki. And Blaine20 says, Joe Biden can kiss my backside. And finally, Kermit says, hey, Biden, you want to restrict travel to Florida? How about you write another executive order and restrict these felt nuts, motherfucker? Like, okay. Little violent from Kermit, but there we go. That's the show.
All right.
That's the
That
show.
was a great show.
I agree.
That was a great show. We did good work.
I fully agree. Yeah, let's talk about getting you set up on like a stream sometime so we can get you to that 4,000 hours. I think it'd be fun.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah.
So as far as like tomorrow,
yeah, if you want to come on tomorrow during the thing. By the way, audience, I'm dumb, so I'll be streaming all whatever many hours they do tomorrow, and Joe will pop in and join me at some point if he's able. And
I fully anticipate doing that.
yeah,
Probably, I'm no commitments, but I was talking to Nick about doing that around 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m.
yeah.
So
what I will tell you though is you need to have a screen that is able to play the C-SPAN video to you, because I can't broadcast it to you because the stream is like
Okay.
20 seconds behind the live.
Right. So I have a second video. I have a second phone, so I can
Okay.
I can put it on there, right?
We might want to sound test it at some point because it could
Oh,
be
that's a good
picking up on
point.
your headphones. So the other thing is,
Ooh. Right. How would we do that where I'm able to hear them? Would I be able to hear it through you if I called in?
no, I can't broadcast it to you, not easily. Not with my setup. There is a setup where I could do it, but I'm not ready. I'm not like prepared for that.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Okay. So I'll think on that. Maybe I'm gonna have to have a second pair of headphones for that, and like have one in one ear and you in the other ear.
yeah, this is why I'm telling you now, because it's like we got to figure out how to do that. I mean, if you've got a laptop that you're using, I don't know, because you got your phone in your hand. What are you watching this
No,
on?
right now actually my phone is leaning against my open laptop.
Oh, so your phone. You just had a different phone. Do you have two phones?
Yeah, I have two phones.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I basically I have two phones and a laptop. So what I'm saying is I can play it through my second phone or through the laptop, and then just have two sets of headphones where I have one headphone that I'm talking to you and the other one that I'm just sort of like getting like a live feed from C-SPAN.
Yeah. Whatever works.
And that way in one ear I'll hear you, and the other ear I'll hear the impeachment.
Yeah, that should work just fine. If that's comfortable
Cool.
for you.
Yeah, I'm cool with that. That's pretty good.
All right. Okay, guys. Wait. Jen Paskey says thanks. And Malik Foxon says, how about you invite Logic to a big brain panel if you ever get to it again? I think he'd be a welcome addition. I would, except Fridays don't tend to work for him. So
yeah, I can't do stuff Friday nights.
So if we ever have a non-Friday night big brain panel, he's definitely invited already. That being said, thank you guys for hanging out with us. I will be on Twitch because I think we're gonna watch Species 2, and then I'm going to collapse and wake up tomorrow. Guys, check out Joe's channel. It's in the description. Peace. Peace.
Peace.